Okay. I think Gordon's getting it. Here. All right. Good evening. I will now call the meeting of the Public Works and Safety Standing Committee to order. We want to welcome everyone to this meeting. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You will have up to 3 minutes to state your comments. Please come forward to the microphone and you will be recognized. For accurate recording purposes, we ask all present to speak directly into a microphone. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call: Bryant.
Here.
Filbert.
Here.
Markley. Here. Kane.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Bynum.
Here. There are no minutes to approve this month, so that will take us directly to our committee agenda. Item number 1 is a resolution for the 2600 North 131st Street short span bridge replacement. And we have Mr. Mike Tobin and Mr. Bill Heatherman here to present some information for us.
Thank you. As most of you know, or some of you know, we did have a culvert washout about 3 weeks ago. And this particular item is just a normal part of doing any project, but the fact that we're carrying this project forward is on an emergency basis in order to get that culvert replaced. We would need this in order to acquire the easements on both sides in order to put the new culvert in place.
Questions?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about how much this project's going to cost. Any idea?
I believe it's around $400,000.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions. The time frame in terms of when it can be done, do you have an estimate on when it'll commence and when it can be finished?
So we're moving the design forward on an expedited basis. They've already been out and surveyed. The designer's on board, beginning plans, and we're going to move this through as quickly as we can. I would hope that we can have this under construction by early fall, and I'm not prepared yet to make a commitment yet because we're just responding to this. I will say in favor of doing studies is that we had done a study of a number of our older stone culverts about 4 years ago. So when they called this one in, I was able to go to tab 4 in my report, and we had a pretty good idea of what we needed to do already lined up.
Commissioner Kane?
I think your address, in fact, I know your address is wrong. You've got 2600, which is Neil Palmer's place, and this is the place right next to it, which I believe the address is 2740.
Okay, we just use kind of a nearby address for this purpose, but we'll double check that.
And then to the north of that bridge is another smaller bridge that doesn't look like it's in that hot a shape either. And then this creek feeds a very large pond. So what I would hope we would do the least amount of disrupting to the woods and to the property and still fix the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? This requires a motion to move forward to full commission, is that correct?
Yes.
So moved. Sorry, second.
Have a motion and a second. Roll call on the motion.
Roll call Bryant,
Aye.
Filbert,
Aye.
Markley. Aye. Kane,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. Item number 2 is discussion on our stormwater improvement policy. And we have, again, Bill Heatherman, our county engineer, and Mr. Tobin here, and can bring us some remarks on this.
Okay. So as mentioned, this is a discussion item, and it has both a general part as well as a particular example that we think illustrates the need for moving forward on some new thinking, if you will, in terms of how we handle stormwater projects. We have not done a lot of what I would call the discretionary enhancement major projects in recent years. And those are projects where you're doing more than a spot repair here and there, or where you're doing more than strictly replacing an existing system, but where you're dealing with a neighborhood adequacy of storm drainage type issue. These are very important type of projects, and we passed a stormwater utility funding mechanism, what has it been, Mike, about 7 years ago, in order to be able to handle projects. And we have a crop of projects that are currently in the process that are moving forward, but we also have to have the ability to respond to new concerns and issues. In the long distant past, when folks would ask about a major stormwater enhancement like this, they would often be quoted that they would need to consider forming a benefit district. And I believe that many of you that have been on the council a long time have probably heard about benefit districts. We do benefit districts for sidewalk and curb repair more frequently, and as you recall, we even had a discussion of the priority of different neighborhoods for the curb and sidewalk type benefit. And those are a lot more straightforward, frankly, for people to get their arms around in terms of the discretionary choice. You can do benefit districts for a whole variety of projects, and stormwater enhancements is definitely one of the eligible types. Those are much more difficult to get formed. We were looking back in the old notes, trying to remember how long ago it has been since the last benefit district for storm drainage improvements had been formed. I think we got back to the mid-90s, a project on Hageman. I don't even have the files. We haven't dug through dead storage to get the rest of the details out. Staff would like to propose that the Commission give some consideration and give us some guidance on how you would like us to be thinking about these neighborhood drainage projects, what kind of criteria or prioritization you might want to have for us. And just as we mentioned during the budget discussion, we believe that an effective way of bringing these projects forward is to work with the Public Works and Safety Standing Committee in the fall, kind of keep before you a list of known neighborhoods and the information that we have about the severity of the need, the readiness of the neighborhood to accept a project, the level of cooperation and enthusiasm, if you will, and how long. You know, how long has this problem been on our list, and how long has the neighborhood been waiting? Those are three very common criteria that we would expect to have molded into some type of policy. And if the Commission believes that benefit districts and that mechanism of getting property owners to pay towards the cost, some percentage of the cost, if you all would direct us to continue to maintain that policy, then we would probably want to prepare some guidelines about the percentage of cost and whatnot. If, however, you do not believe that we really need that kind of a policy, if there's other ways to kind of get the sharing that we need, it might actually be simpler in some ways to move projects forward. So we brought it tonight as a discussion item. I will tell you there is a particular project that has been on our radar screen for at least the entire 5 years I've been here. And it is the kind of project that staff believes is of the right size and the right need that we would actually propose to slot it forward. And it's already been proposed in the budget. So no real action tonight would be needed unless in this discussion we find out that you have other priorities in the budgeting process. But your discussion on this and your guidance to us may be, you know, very relevant in terms of us making sure that this project at South 52nd and Douglas is all, you know, positioned so it could go forward or be adjusted if need be. And so with that, I would open it to questions.
Commissioner Merkley.
So Bill knows me well from drainage issues, and I sometimes feel bad about how many I bring to him, but as those of you who were here through the survey process know, my district was a little bit of an anomaly in that in the top 5 items that my district put forward as the top 5 issues, District 6 listed drainage, stormwater drainage issues as one of those top 5. They were the only one in the county to have that among their top 5. So we just have a lot of those issues within my area. My take on this, and Bill's heard it many times, is that if we want, as we say in our strategic plan, our neighborhoods to be places where people want to live for life, we cannot continue to let these drainage issues ruin our houses and our housing values. You know, across our county, we have areas that have had drainage problems for 20 years. Every time it rains, someone's basement is being filled with water. And we've had this benefit district concept, but the reality of drainage issues is the whole neighborhood doesn't want to pay for something that affects only the neighbors at the bottom of the hill. That's just the reality. That's human nature. So when you go to your neighborhood, of this larger neighborhood of worth of people, and say, the 6 people at the bottom of the hill, their houses are flooding every other day, we should help them. Those people up the hill, they're not willing to pay for that. And the 6 people at the bottom of the hill can't afford to split a $3 million bill to fix their drainage problem. That's not realistic. So I think the question for us as a commission is, are we going to continue to let those neighborhoods decay, many of which are in the older areas of our city, or are we going to step up and say, we want to have neighborhoods where people want to live, we need to start dealing with these drainage issues one at a time, over time, until we've started to resolve some of these problems that are impacting our communities every day.
Commissioner Philbrook?
You were mentioning the possibility of a simpler method. Did you have a method to your madness on that?
So, you know, we have an outline of some ideas that we would be willing to share over time, but we wanted not to preclude too much about the kind of guidance you would give. From what I've observed in other cities, including some that I have experience with, you do need to have a criteria that insists upon neighborhood cooperation. You cannot be successful in these kind of projects, you know, against a headwind of you know, non-interest. You can succeed if the neighborhood's mad and upset about their history, as long as the neighborhood is on board with the idea of the future that's being laid out for a project. So that needs to be a criteria.
So you're meaning, for instance, what she's relating to, that the top of the hill is not interested, but they're part of the neighborhood.
No, what I'm
Right.
saying is if you've had a project that's been on the list 20 years and nobody's that currently very interested, you need to make sure that you're going through a process of reinitiating the general interest before you would carry a project forward. And I don't think that's usually not an issue. There are usually always in front of you a select number of projects that have the kind of momentum that, you know, you could feel comfortable carrying a project forward with.
So
I think it's more about, are people okay with having their yard dug up? Because if some of the neighbors say, I'd rather just have the drainage problem and you put tiles in my basement than have my whole front yard dug up, you know, there has to be that level of investment where they're willing to say, yeah, destroy my street and yard as long as
No, I understand all of that. That's not the question. My question is how many people in the neighborhood need to be vested in this or invested in it, you know, and what strategies are there possibly? So it sounds like another conversation with a group, doesn't it?
Well, if I could throw another 2 cents in here, please, Commissioner. Going back, you have to remember it took us quite a number of years to pass the stormwater utility. It was before the commission several times before it was finally approved. So by the time it was finally approved, there were several $1 million worth of stormwater projects that were sitting there that our citizens wanted fixed, repaired, completed, that were just sitting on the books. Part of where this discussion needs to go, and one of the reasons we're bringing it up now, is there's not a lot of this in the budget, but we're moving forward with a budget for you to approve, and then we're going to move past that into strategic planning. And we would like this to be one of the topics for everyone to consider during that period, because as Commissioner Markley so aptly stated a few minutes ago, these are all over our county. There's not a district, and I don't care from where the newer construction is to the oldest part of the city, that doesn't have drainage problems. And I don't think that the benefit district process is the way to go. I think the way to go is for us to agree between staff and commission and say, this is our stormwater policy and this is the way we're going to do the projects. And it's not going to be very rapid, but we are going to move through them. Thank you.
I agree with Commissioner Markley entirely, and yes, these areas are all over our community, and I was at a neighborhood picnic just a week ago where this was the item that a gentleman came to talk to me about, and have had it brought up to me for years, way back when I was at Leavenworth Road Association, and again recently and just the last week by yet another person. So I think it is a good idea to look at the policy. I think I'm hearing staff say commission guidance on, but yet at the same time you have ideas that you'd like to bring forward to us on what a policy could look like, because without a benefit district, am I correct then that we'd have to find a way to pay for that side of the cost burden? I think there's a question in there somewhere.
Yes. So we always, the benefit districts in general do take out a bond for the entire amount of the project, but then depending on what percentage of the project cost is being reimbursed through the improvement district, you know, that lessens the amount of general fund or stormwater utility fund payments that would be applied. So yes, if we were doing currently you know, 2 benefit districts a year and we were recovering 50% of the cost and we were making this process change at the same pace, we would double the cost. The reality is we aren't doing any and probably would not do any, or very infrequently with this policy in place. With this policy out of place, then we would have to be ready to steadily budget the funds out of the stormwater utility. Fortunately, with the utility, you have a fund source that can handle that. We will probably see much more need come out without that suppression effect that the benefit district message caused. And then that's where it's going to get tricky, is not so much you'll be able to find sufficient projects to spend whatever dollars we program for this, and so it's going to be a question of how do you prioritize, and that's really going to be the difference.
Commissioner Johnson?
In cases such as the one that was provided to us, there was some new development that had taken place, and the question that I had just kind of jotted down was, in the case where there is new development that is going on, is there any way that we can pass along some of those costs back to the developer, or is it you have to budget that in advance? I mean, when you have the situation where there's more of a problem that's being created as a result of the new development, is there an opportunity to have an exchange between the county and the developer in terms of sharing of costs?
So the way the system works is the new developments do provide for their own infrastructure, and they also go through a development review process that takes into account what impact that development may have on the adjacent subdivision and what mitigation is put in, and whether that's a detention pond or whether it's some other mitigation. For the most part, that works itself out. Now, this particular neighborhood has been a source of frustration, and we're not in a position as staff to say that actually the development itself was the cause or not the cause. But anytime you have infill and redevelopment going on where you had previously undeveloped tracts next to developed tracts, and especially if they're older, you may or may not have the kind of system in place that you would like to have if everything was newer and of the same era. And those are very difficult conversations to have because sometimes there is no clear-cut single authority that can just say, yes, this caused that problem, or no, it didn't, and then people become, kind of concerned about, well, what measures do I need to take to get this resolved? So this has been a point of contention between the neighborhood and the developer. Concern about whether the review was adequate or not. And we're not in a position tonight to kind of rule on that. I will say that in general our development processes are quite good. And so we should not be having situations where this type of concern is frequently the case. But if you have a program that allows you to deal with older neighborhoods effectively, that's even one more tool in the toolbox as we promote redevelopment and infill development.
The second question I have is, in the model that you provided for us in terms of the overall total project cost, you have a 20% contingency in there. And is that the standard? And if in fact, just kind of dovetailing off my first comment, if it is in fact the standard, does that take into consideration future issues or just project-central issues, project-centric issues?
Storm drainage projects are notoriously difficult to estimate until you get into them. And in fact, this original engineering estimate, our budget proposal is higher than this because we've already anticipated that these contingencies may be a little bit too light. Storm drainage, there's just a lot of unknowns until you get into the design. My first mentor in stormwater engineering said, do your best, most particular estimate that you can, then double it and hope you can get done for that. So we will get better at these estimates as we go, but I will say that drainage projects are among the most difficult to estimate in advance.
Bill, do you have a metric that you'd like to propose for the commission to look at, or are you more concerned that you hear from them what other ideas they may have that wouldn't be something that you already have looked into?
So we can work on a little finer points to a policy that we can bring you in the fall, but any such policy I think would anchor on three main pieces. One is there really does need to be a criteria of the threshold of drainage problem that is existing in order to justify the public purse. And there are a lot of problems that are yard related or backyard erosion that really, unless they threaten structures or public safety, they probably shouldn't be going forward. So that's one criteria, is just level of technical need. The second does need to be neighborhood readiness. And that may not preclude a project, but it may require that a project have a few more years to really get everyone on board. And then the last really is time on list, because at some point part of the purpose of a drainage project is not just to deal with the technical problem, but provide the reassurance to the neighborhood that the neighborhood itself is valued. And if it takes you 30 years to get your project done, a lot of those other secondary effects have already taken place.
Anything else from the commissioners or Mr. Bryant? Just, I want to thank you. I appreciate these 3 points you're making. I think neighborhood readiness will be an issue where we will want to spend some time identifying what that looks like. And if as we move forward with further detail on what a plan like this would look like, if you could bring us, if you haven't already, what do you think the top 10 priority stormwater projects are, that sort of thing, and so that we can begin thinking about those neighborhoods and how to engage those neighborhoods in helping us make this a policy that everybody can live with. So,
Commissioner?
Anything else? Yes.
Me, Gordon.
Oh, hi, Gordon.
Did you want staff to prepare the top 10 list before strategic planning this fall, or
Sure.
have it about the same time, or?
I mean, I think if it's not too too difficult for you to ascertain? You probably know what they are. I'd be interested in what you think the top 10 are, so maybe before, maybe even between budget and strategic planning. That gives you some time.
We can work with that. So just for clarity, the particular example project that we listed for you here, South 52nd and Douglas, it has been proposed in the budget, and we have not identified it as a benefit district requirement. So the default is if the budget is adopted as currently proposed, then that project would be authorized for next year. And so that's how we have structured that. If the committee wanted to make a more positive statement about guidance on that project, you can. But even without further action, it is, it's in the queue to be allocated as a project.
I'd just like to volunteer a positive statement that I would love to see that project done. And I also want to say I appreciate Bill Heatherman's patience in the 4 and some change years that I've been here. He has heard from me more times than he cares to, I'm sure, about drainage issues, and he is always patient and helpful, so I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate this presentation. And it was for information only, so we do appreciate your time, and we look forward to moving forward on this.
Thank you, Commissioners.
The last item on this agenda is a presentation and proposed ordinance changes regarding parades and marathons. And Gordon Criswell, our Assistant County Administrator, will kick us off with some opening remarks and introduce the other staff that's coming forward to help.
Thank you, Commissioner. You will recall, I believe, late last fall, we made a presentation with the police department concerning a study that we did related to runs and marathons in our community. The highlight of that study was we're the only community in the metropolitan area that does not charge anything to recoup what it cost us to staff and safely ensure that folks coming into our community for runs and marathons are able to do that. So you all directed us to come back with some recommendations related to primarily location and cost. And I think if I remember correctly, the proviso was we want to support organizations that come into our community because it's a form of economic development. We want to support our local nonprofit organizations in their activities. And so we have before you tonight first some changes in the basic ordinance that Jenny will talk about. We've tweaked the language in the ordinance just a little bit. And then we'll move into Deputy Chief Steele and Executive Assistant Smith's presentation on some recommendations of potential routes that we could present to folk who want to do runs in our community and what that would cost us. So we'll start with the ordinance changes first. Jenny, you'll lead us through that discussion, please.
Okay. This is under Section 32 of the Code of Ordinances. The first main change is this entire section is titled Marathons. Since this actually does include all types of runs, walks, bikes, any type of event, we discussed changing it from marathons to just runs. And then there's a definition of run already in the ordinance, which includes any race, marathon, bikeathon, walkathon, or jogging group. So everything would be included under there. Section 32-292, I removed the properly licensed security guards, and we'll just stick with law enforcement officers from the KCKPD. And it previously said that a price could be determined at an hourly rate by the operators or sponsors of the marathon. Since we are, the chief of police is determining or making a suggestion as to what that price should be, I removed that language. Under Section 32-323, we ask that they submit their application to the chief of the police 30 days prior to the event, so it just changed from 15 days to 30 days. Section 32-323 applications, that's where I added in that they will fill out, the applicant will fill out a statement that the applicant agrees to reimburse the city for all expenses required to hire or to bring in an off-duty police officer or public works personnel to properly control the activity. So that's where the applicant will be informed that a fee would be charged. And I believe that's the majority of the ordinance changes.
Questions?
Just a clarification. The application is kind of a permit, but
Yes.
the only fee associated would be the reimbursement cost of law enforcement? Or is there a permit fee and?
No, I believe the only fee associated would be the law enforcement, or if we added public works, you know, for barricades or anything like that that is needed.
So reimbursement of
Of
costs?
Yes.
Okay,
Real quick question.
yes.
So then they basically come to you, ask for you to assist them in their run or whatever. You guys figure out what it's gonna cost them and tell them up front, say, you'll be responsible for this.
Yes, and I believe,
Yes, it would be, Commissioner, it would be, it's factored in as far as manpower and that type of thing. As
Right.
far as how many man hours, that type of thing.
Right, no, I understand. I just wanted to make sure that they know up front what they're in for.
Yes.
That's all. Okay, thank you.
Just another quick question. This may have been addressed or will be. The nonprofits that hold annual parades and whatnot, will they be subject to this?
I think that we actually determined that the parades will not be affected in this. Right now, we're only going what used to be called marathons. That's what we're amending and focusing on. We are not altering the parades at this time.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner, it's about marathons and the runs and that type of thing. We're not gonna deal with the parade stuff.
Anything else? Okay, so we're ready for the next part of the presentation.
Everybody ready?
Deputy Chief?
Okay, thank you, sir. My name's Kevin Steele, Deputy Chief. Myself and Major Smith are here to present tonight, commissioners and members of the committee. First, I just want to kind of say that it's kind of neat to be a part of a topic like this, because back in the mid-90s, we wouldn't be talking about this type of thing. So I think it's great and a compliment to the community at large that we're able to address marathons, and the fact that the marathon problem, if you want to call it that, has actually increased over the years due to the popularity of our community. So I think it's one of those types of things that it's great to sit around and talk about this and come up with some solutions as far as how we're going to handle this. Staff looked into this issue and studied it, and a little background here real quick on the year-to-date as far as the types of permits that we've been issued since 2015. You see right there, 16 marathon permits, 13 KCK groups, 3 organizations from outside Wyandotte County, 9 marathon permits denied, 8 organizations from outside Wyandotte County, and 1 KCK group denied the request at the event at the Legends. It's important to mention this, and that obviously the marathon permits have picked up. My experience, having been West Patrol Commander at one time, night commander, back in the mid-2000s, starting out with the T-Bones when we brought them on board, that type of thing, the marathons have really increased as far as the popularity of that, so the venue. The marathon permit process, desired outcomes, obviously they're listed here. Develop safe routes that keep traffic and business disruptions to a minimal. Determine the amount of police department resources needed to safely support the events. Maintain significant police department resources in the areas that are affected. And enrich the community relationships by finding ways, like I said, to assist local organizations that want the opportunity to have a fundraiser with a run in our community, and maintain that balance with the need and the desire with what we as a police department and law enforcement agency and the UG, as far as balancing those resources with the rest of the community and the other community members and their desires. Marathon, as instructed, the department came up with 4 different scenarios to present to you all tonight. Obviously, it's one of those types of things in which we can tweak this to your needs. If you have additional questions or follow-up, obviously we'll get back with you and say that and bring it back to you. The first one is the actual marathon itself, which officers needed to conduct this type of event are listed there. It's like we start out big here with a 26-mile type race, which is an actual marathon. I'm not a marathon expert, so excuse me. But the officer that would need to safely conduct the race, we estimated 24 officers. Volunteers needed for the control points would be 35. Estimated hours for the setup and breakdown of the event would be 8 hours. And estimated police department cost approximately $9,700. Again, that may vary up or down depending on the rate factor of the officers that were working it. And I want to stress that this would all be done with off-duty officers. No on-duty resources would be required for this. We looked at it as far as off-duty personnel working these events. So that's one of the scenarios as far as the actual 26-mile marathon. Here's the route that we staff studied and came up with, and the route in and of itself there, I know it's kind of hard to read. Basically, it starts around the Speedway Drive area and then goes up 118th, about 132nd. See if I got my pointer there. Up in that area, and comes off 123rd, comes back around Pulfer, up into Walcott, and then comes back down to 99th Street into Donahue, right there, and then comes back down into the Legends area. That's one route as far as the marathon route goes. Then we came up with a half marathon, which, as stated there, we estimated to safely conduct the race, 8 officers, off-duty officers, volunteers that would be needed from the organization themselves. I should stress that would be approximately 18 people. Estimated hours for setup and breakdown, 6 hours, and estimated police department cost, as you see there, $2,500. In this particular route, it actually starts out again, the Village West area, and goes west on Village West into the Speedway Drive area here, loops around by the track, and ends up coming back off 126th Street. There's State Avenue there. I'm sorry, excuse me. And then comes back up to 126th and 136th Street there. Then loops back around on Donahue, then back down on 115th Street, and then back into the Legends area. That's the half marathon route. Third proposal was a 10K run type deal with officers that would be needed would be approximately 10 officers. Volunteers from the organization itself that would want to do the event, obviously around 21 people we estimated. Estimated hours of setup and breakdown, 5 hours, and estimated departmental cost $2,500. This route here would loop around the Village West area. It would take it out east towards 435, as you can see, around the Speedway, come back around the south side of the Speedway, and then onto the west end of the Speedway and back around into the Village West area. The 5K run, officers needed to safely conduct the race, approximately 8 officers. Volunteers needed to control points, 18. As we see there, estimated time of breakdown 3 hours, and the cost is there, $1,200 approximately. And that setup would entail the Village West area again, the immediate area of Village West with the Stadium Drive and the Village West Parkway area being utilized for that. And any questions, commissioners?
Yes. In terms of the beginning of the PowerPoint where you had 16 permits approved and 9 denied. As far as how that relates to the rest of your presentation, the routes and whatnot, and the cost estimates that you've come up with, were any of those based on any of these real marathons? Or even maybe one of the permits that was denied? Does my question make sense? Did you
Yes.
use a real-life example to come up with the examples that you've shown us with the costs and the routes?
Staff, they went ahead and they studied different scenarios
Okay.
as far as placement of personnel and that type of thing with the routes. And commissioners, the figures come about with those different scenarios that they actually studied.
Okay.
Does that answer your
I
question?
think
or?
so. I was just curious.
And I got Major Smith can also.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. The majority of the denied permits were organizations from outside the city that were requesting to run marathons or, runs of various lengths in the Village West area. Chief Ziegler had the traffic unit go out and find some routes that, were the most economical that we could run and still be in the Legends area. So if someone wants to run an event out there, we can offer them one of these routes instead of denying them. A lot of the requested routes, because in the past the groups would make up their own suggested route, and
Right.
they're running around the Legends for 3 hours where we can't shut it down. And it takes too many resources. And you'll see the longer races, like the marathon and the half marathon. We start in Village West, and the groups are able to tour through Village West, but then we get them out of Village West, and they can go do 10 miles, through the area, and then they finish up there. So we're letting the groups have an option to have their event in that area, but it's just not necessarily what they're continually putting in, and they're getting denied because we can't afford to do those events.
Does that answer your question,
It does.
Commissioner?
It's helpful. And so if a group came, you would put forward yes with one of these routes?
Yes, ma'am.
And because I'm not as familiar with the charity runs as I might be with like bicycle rides and then motorcycle charity rides. Does this speak to motorcycle charity rides at all?
No, ma'am.
Does it need
Just
to?
the runs and the motors.
It
yes,
doesn't
the
need to
marathons.
address
Ma'am,
motorcycle?
but we do have, I went through all the permits just this afternoon that have either been approved or denied. And we still have events around the city. Rosedale, there's a bike ride. We have approved events that are going to happen there. This is really more along the lines of dealing with groups that aren't localized and they just want to come in and use the Legends. So this isn't we're not ruling out all other events. They're on a case-by-case basis, and most of the local groups, they have the same events every year, so we're used to approving those, and we're set up for those. This is just for, to make an option where we can work together with the other agencies and have something at the Legends.
Just, I'm sorry, sir. Just to tag on to let everybody know that the events are becoming so popular that it's starting to stretch departmental resources on the UG together, which, like I said before, is a great thing. Throughout the metropolitan area, KCMO, for instance, Leewood, they have permits, they have charging type things like we are proposing here, in which they charge organizations that want to run or do a marathon or something to that effect. So what we're proposing isn't really anything outside the norm. It's something that now is pretty standard in the industry as far as recouping some of the cost of having these events, while at the same time we understand from the department end to balance that with the community need. People want to go out to the Legends or wherever. It's a good popular venue, we know, to ride and run and that type of thing. So it's one of those types of things we're just trying to balance and find that balance with some type of charge for the services that we're rendering.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you. So in this case where the 26-mile race, the estimated police department cost is $9,700. Is that what we're proposing, that we would pass that cost along to the sponsors of that event?
Yes, Commissioner, that would be an approximate cost that would be obviously up front when they applied for the permit. The mechanics of it would be that this information would be available online on our website, that type of thing, so that when people downloaded the permit application, they would have all this information available. They would know up front exactly how much it would cost.
Okay, I've got several comments. Commissioner Markley?
Okay, so I'm going to clarify. This might be kind of what you were trying to get at. So today you've talked about the legends because it sounds like that's where you've had the most requests and you've had to deny them because you didn't have route. But if somebody comes to you and says, I want to run a marathon over by KU Med, you're not going to say to them, no, you have to run it out the legends, here's my route.
Good question. In fact, I thought about that myself. It's one of those types of things that this process would be implemented citywide. We would envision, once we get through this process here, and if you see fit to prove it, that we would then design routes throughout the city. That would be like a template type thing to say, okay, this is the route you run around KU Med, for instance.
Okay. Commissioner Kane?
Let them go first, please.
Mr. Bryant?
So in each of these scenarios, you have a list also of approximate number of volunteers needed for the control points. Would there be a stipulation in the agreement in advance, letting them know that there's a minimum number that would be required to be able to, the day of, to make sure that it goes through, and no reimbursement in case you don't have?
Yes, sir. My recollection when I was working in the chief's office is that the application of itself actually lists per ordinance. A parade marshal, you have to list that. Then you have to list approximately how many volunteers you would have on the route, that type of thing.
Commissioner Kane?
Well, I'm just glad we came up with something that now we know we have a plan. Because before it wasn't working, you know, they'd make X amount of laps around the legends, people were getting upset. So yeah, it's great to start there, maybe great to finish there, even better that to get out and about. And I think you guys did a good job. And do we need a motion for this?
Well, I think we might have some folks in the audience that would like to speak to the issue. I think maybe now would be a good time if we feel like our questions have been answered. Okay. So I think they'll come to the table behind, correct? Are there, or to the microphone, I apologize. Are there any members of the audience that have any comments on this issue? Or not?
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Bryant,
Aye.
Filbert,
Aye.
Markley. Aye. Kane,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. All right. That concludes this meeting.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your attendance. We
Thanks,
are
guys.
adjourned.
Good work.
5-minute break, ladies and gentlemen. We are back in session. I will call this meeting of the Administration and Human Services Standing Committee to order. We want to welcome everyone to this meeting. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You will have up to 3 minutes to state your comments. Please come forward to the microphone and you will be recognized. For accurate recording purposes, we ask all present, commissioners included, to speak directly into the microphone. Roll call. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call. Philbrook.
Here.
Kane.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Bynum. Here. Markley.
Here. We have no minutes to approve this month, so we will jump straight into the Standing Committee agenda. We do have a blue sheet item for tonight's agenda. It is a new item and will be added to the agenda as item number 4. I don't know that we have physical copies of said blue sheet, but you do have it by email. Item 1 is an ordinance prohibiting electronic cigarettes. At our last meeting, we had a presentation on this issue, and we instructed staff to come back with the ordinance. Since we had the presentation last meeting, I did not, I advised the KU doctors I did not think they needed to come to re-present. But it looks like we have a representative here. If you guys do have any questions, and Misty Brown is here to present as well.
Good evening, Commissioners. I am Misty Brown with the Legal Department. As Commissioner Markley said last month, we enjoyed a presentation by KU, and Robin Liston with KU is here as well. And today you have the actual ordinance changes in front of you that I'm proposing. They are basically a new definition for electronic cigarette or e-cigarettes and a new definition for tobacco products. And then I've went and tweaked the definition of smoking and specialty tobacco stores to incorporate electronic cigarettes in there. Additional edits were then made to make sure our ordinances were more in compliance with state law. And then there was a section pertaining to the smoking license that I repealed just so it appeared better online and read better. I'm happy to go into it in more detail if the commission would like, or answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments from the commission? All right.
Good work.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the public? All right. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded. Roll call.
Roll call. Philbrook.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bynum. Aye. Markley.
Aye. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Item 2 is a presentation of our local area workforce partnership. Marlon Goff and Greg Kindle are here to speak on this item, and I suspect Commissioner Philbrook will also add some comment.
Well, I have a whole herd here. I have a whole herd, and really,
Welcome.
it's not just workforce partnership. It's actually workforce partnership along with our workforce development folks that Greg Kendall has been steering for a while.
Good evening, Commissioners. Marlon Goff with Economic Development. So this agenda item tonight essentially represents an opportunity for us, the various stakeholder groups around the table, to report out and have a discussion about some of the workforce development initiatives and activities we've been carrying out probably for the better part of the last 12 or 18 months, I think what we'll talk about. So that end, we'll just go down the table and you guys can introduce yourself for the record.
I'm Trent Howerton. I'm with Workforce Partnership.
I'm Scott Engelmeyer. I'm Executive Director of Workforce Partnership.
I'm Greg Kindle, President of the Wyandotte Economic Development Council.
So first, we'll have a quick presentation by Workforce Partnership. And depending on your age or how long you've been a member of this community, you've probably heard their office referred to as the old unemployment office, the Job Services Center, and more recently, Workforce Partnership. Previously, and for several years, they were located there just on that northeast corner of State Avenue and North 6th Street. But here, recently, they've relocated to a new facility just on 6th and Minnesota. So with that, I'm going to turn this presentation over to Workforce Partnership, and they'll walk us through the first half of our presentation.
I'm going to try to be brief, so if it seems like I'm racing through this presentation, we do have an opportunity for questions afterwards, and I encourage questions in dialogue. This is sometimes very dense material, and it's easy to get bogged down, as certain people in the room know that I can do. So I'm going to try to avoid that. So let me start out with, this is the outline of the presentation. Again, it's dense material. There are lots of acronyms that we have and tend to use those acronyms rather than the words. So we'll start out with some terms and defining some terms which I think will help set the tone for the presentation and fill in some information on what we're talking about. Then we'll talk about the organizational chart and why that's important and why that matters to the unified government and the commission. Some description of our services and some opportunity for questions and answers. So workforce partnership is actually a brand name or a label more than anything else. It's the term that we use to define the board that we have as well as the system, the workforce development system that the board is building throughout the area that we serve. We serve Johnson, Leavenworth, and Wyandotte counties. There's no legal entity called Workforce Partnership. Actually, the organization that Trent and I work for has the wonderfully bureaucratic sounding name of Local Workforce Investment Area 3 Incorporated, which is part of the reason that we've decided to develop Workforce Partnership, which sounds at least slightly less bureaucratic. We talk a lot about WIA. That's the Workforce Investment Act. That's the act that has governed our activities since 1998. I'm going to skip to the bottom. That is now being replaced by WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Congress passed that last year, and the President signed it in a rare example of bipartisanship, and actually both chambers working together as well, that is overhauling some of the requirements that we face. That formally goes into effect July 1, so we are in really the last week, or just about the last week of the Workforce Investment Act. We sometimes refer to ourselves as LWIA3, or Local Workforce Investment Area 3. That's the region that we serve, Johnson, Leavenworth, and Wyandotte counties, and again, our legal name is in that. That's a region designated by the state, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Sometimes we abbreviate that to Area 3, and again, that's those three counties, Johnson, Leavenworth, and Wyandotte counties. I'm not going to go in great detail over this, but I want to give you an example of the complex relationships that we're talking about here. Again, our activities are governed by federal law. The U.S. Department of Labor administers that. And then there's a state oversight role. The governor has designated the Department of Commerce as the agency that administers workforce programs in the state, and specifically our programs. The state designates the regions, and again, they've designated 5 regions in the state. We are Region 3. Each region is supposed to have a Chief Elected Officials Board. Commissioner Phil Brooks sits on that now. We did have Commissioner Maddox on that. We haven't replaced his seat yet, working on some of that now. We also have representatives from Leavenworth and Johnson County as well. Those individuals appoint our governing board, actually. So we have a Chief Elected Officials Board. We also have a governing board of Workforce Partnership that consists of, right now, 31 members. The new law is going to allow us to get that down to a little more manageable number. We're working on, the working number we have is 23 members now, and we're working on that appointment process right now. And they govern the day-to-day activities, or govern the system as well. There are various roles, what we call a one-stop operator role. That's an entity that actually operates the centers. One of the weird things about the law is the board cannot operate it and needs to select somebody else. We've selected an entity called Kaiser Group Incorporated. But we do have an administrative entity that administers the relationships with the state, things like that. That's what the organization that Trent and I work for essentially do. Within that system, we have a number of required partners. Those are along the bottom of the screen there. Those are mainly federally funded employment and training programs, which would include adult basic education. It would include what's called Wagner-Pizer, which is really what we think of when we think of the old job service offices. Those are still state employees, so we have state employees working in our workforce centers under the Workforce Partnership name. Vocational rehabilitation is also a required partner. So we wanted to give you a brief description of our services. Again, there are a lot of things that we can do, so this is a really high level and I think fast description of the things that we do. As Marlon mentioned, we moved last December to a location at 626 Minnesota, right across from the library. where that we call our Wyandotte Workforce Center. That is a comprehensive center where everything is available. We also have a working relationship with Kansas City, Kansas Community College in the Technical Education Center. So we have a staff that's located there. That's been a relationship that's worked out very well. It's something that initially started out under a grant that they received. That grant is expiring now, and we think the relationship has worked so well, we're going to continue that. And it's a great relationship with the school, and once Johnson County Community College found out about that, they got very jealous and wanted us to do the same thing. We're working on that relationship now in Johnson County. In that center, we operate 3 different funding streams within the Workforce Investment Act, or soon to be within WIOA. Adult services, dislocated worker services, and youth services, and they each have their own specific rules and requirements that we have to deal with. In Wyandotte County last year, both in that center and electronically through kansasworks.com, we've served over 33,000 job seekers in this county last year. We have job seeker services. We also have employer services. In fact, we talk a lot about having a dual customer approach and that we have to serve both well. One of the ways that we serve employers, and we'll talk about this a little on an upcoming slide, is through posting job orders. And employers can go out and post their own job orders. This 1100 number that we have on the next bullet point is the number that we did some staff-assisted work on. I don't think we have an exact count of the number of Wyandotte County job orders we posted last year, but it's more than that 1100. We have some federally required performance measures that we're responsible for. We have the entered employment rate, which basically means once we exit or stop working with somebody, they have to enter employment within the first quarter after exit. So 79% of the people that we exited were employed in that first quarter after exit. Of that amount, then, we calculate a retention rate, and that's based upon the third quarter after exit. 87% of those were still employed, not necessarily with the same employer, but usually with the same employer in the third quarter after exit. We are also responsible for average wages at placement. The idea behind this program is not just to get somebody a job, but get somebody a quality job, and our average wage at placement is almost $13 an hour. Which, you know, given our base customer, which is somebody who generally is fairly low skilled, being able to place them at $13 an hour gets them on a path so that they can then have a good career path. Increasingly, that's what we're really focused on, is not just that initial placement, but getting them on a career pathway. So they have that initial placement, but they're also set up that they can continue to progress throughout their career. And those are all right now, I believe all 3 of those are exceeding the goals that we have that are imposed upon us by the federal government, by the state government. So we're actually performing better than the expectations that are upon us. So just a really quick description of our services, and again, this is very high level because there are so many different things that we can do. These are some of the major things that we do. Certainly we work with a lot of those 33,000. We're doing really just placement work, where we're helping them with resumes, we're helping them with interviews, we're helping them identify job opportunities that maybe they haven't seen, doing some things to help them with their job search. So job search assistance is a big part of what we do. Sometimes that will involve things like resumes. We have some software that we use. We have some one-on-one assistance that we use. An individual can come in. You know, increasingly the job search process has to be online. So many employers are going to online systems. So in all 3 of our workforce centers, we have what we call a career center, which is a bank of computers. An individual can come in and do that, which we hope, at least in terms of job search, helps close that digital divide a little bit. And going along with that is the fact that those individuals sometimes don't have the skills to use computers, and there's still a lot of people out there that have never really touched a computer or are afraid of computers. One of the significant services we do is helping people with those basic computer skills, both in terms of this is a computer, here's how you turn it on, here's what you do, as well as some training on typically something like the Microsoft Office suite of services, which helps them in the job search process, but also is increasingly a requirement for more and more jobs that are out there. We do some one-on-one case management, which would involve helping develop some goals for individuals and helping them develop a plan to achieve those goals. For individuals that qualify, and there's sort of there's an additional level of qualification based primarily on income. We can do, or employment status, we can do training scholarships for individuals where we will pay for them to get training at a community college or a technical school or proprietary school. We actually have a process of approving those programs. Those programs have to meet actual labor market needs in the area. But that's a significant use of our resources and also a really important step for individuals that are very low skilled, getting them on that pathway into not just that initial job, but that lifelong career. Increasingly, some of our resources are going toward on-the-job training. We find that combining that with that classroom training is really what seems to work out well to prepare people for the world of work. Classroom training is wonderful, and we will continue to do that, but we've also found that employers increasingly are telling us people need those soft skills, and one of the ways we've found to develop those soft skills is get them in the world of work. You can, I give the analogy, if I have two teenagers and I can tell the teenagers over and over, you need to do this, you need to do that, they have to learn that for themselves. And being able to provide support to employers for that on-the-job training allows them to assume the risk of somebody who doesn't have those soft skills and to develop those soft skills while they are working. So increasingly we're doing that. This last idea of supportive services is the idea that if we send an individual to training, they sometimes need childcare, they need transportation assistance, they need things like that. We can provide those things too, because often those things are barriers to them actually getting the job training or the skills training that they need. So our resources often go towards supportive services. I mentioned before that we have what we call a dual customer approach, and we consider both job seekers and employers co-equal customers. It sounds like a trite saying, but I believe it's true. If we don't serve one well, we can't serve the other well. So I'll go very briefly over the business services that we provide. We help a lot with job posting, which we talked about before. As part of the candidate recruitment process, we can do recruitment events for employers. We invite employers into our workforce centers to actually do mini job fairs within our centers. Those are some of the basic services we do. Higher level things that we might do are helping them screen. Especially small employers that really don't have that ability to screen, don't know what to look for in a resume, or just don't have the time to do that. Our staff do a lot of that. We do a number of assessments. They can be customized assessments for the employer. They can be some off-the-shelf, readily approved things that have passed EEOC approval as assessments for particular positions. That's something increasingly we do. On-the-job training we view as an employer service just as much as we do a job seeker service. Increasingly, we're going to have the ability under the new act to do more customized training where we can work specifically with an employer, and rather than saying you have to go to this class that's already been developed at a school or something like that, we can do something that's very customized for them and pay to train several people at once. Rather than the kind of one-on-one training that typically we've done. Mentioned before that we provide space for employers to come in, and we have employers that regularly take advantage of that. This last one is something that seems pretty simple, but it's increasingly important. Labor market information, helping employers understand that if they're looking for somebody with a bachelor's degree, they can't pay $10 an hour. That this particular occupation, if they really want the quality candidate they want, here's the amount that they have to pay, here's what the availability is, here's where you might have to do some recruiting, things like that. Other services that we do, in cooperation with the state, when an employer has a mass layoff event, the state notifies us. We send individuals out to do rapid response. The idea really is, once those people receive the layoff notice, we want to get them immediately on the path of the transition to reemployment. And employers generally are very willing to allow us to come into their workspace when they have issued those layoff notices and work with the individuals even before that layoff actually takes effect. That's a pretty significant service we do. It was obviously very big during the recession, tails off a little bit now. We provide a lot of services through a mobile unit. We have a 38-foot mobile unit with 13 computer workstations where we can do on-site training, we can do on-site recruiting events. I know we've used that significantly at the Legends with multiple employers. It can be sectioned off so we can actually do 3 different interviews with 3 different employers all at the same time in that mobile unit. We talked a little bit about youth services before. We're really focused on serving out-of-school youth. Youth is defined in the new act as age 16 to 24. And what we're really focusing on are people who are basic skills deficient but have left school, whether they've dropped out or, you know, there are still instances where we have some basic skills deficient individuals who have high school diplomas. But we really work on getting that credential and getting some additional training and bringing those basic skills up. We have state employees who provide veteran services that are a part of our system and work in our system. We have, I believe, five of those across our system, 2 of whom work in Wyandotte County now. There's a separate program called Trade Adjustment Assistance. If an individual loses their job due to foreign competition, there's actually a higher amount of training that we can provide somebody to do that. That's also a state-administered program, but it again works through our system. And we also do some very specialized assistance for people who are unemployment insurance claimants. That's what UI stands for. That's another one of those acronyms that we use that we sometimes don't stop to explain. Our services are available to anybody who's a job seeker, whether they're on unemployment or not. If you are on unemployment assistance, we actually have some tailored programs that we're able to do for that to help speed up the process of transition to reemployment, hopefully saving the government money by minimizing the time that somebody is drawing unemployment insurance. I could do an hour-long presentation on this. I'm going to do this in 30 seconds here. Commissioner Philbrook has worked with our board on a transformation plan that we're very excited about. We've recognized both some of the federal changes that were coming as well as changes in the labor market and realized we needed to do things significantly differently from how we've done in the past. So we've developed a 6-point transformation plan. Among those are decentralizing, getting our staff out in the community, getting away from the idea of they have to come to us and making sure we are going to where the job seekers and the employers are. We're exploring some new and novel partnerships that we've never done before, trying to go beyond the minimum required and identifying partners who can really assist what we do that perhaps we've never been mandated to deal with before. We know that there are a lot of organizations that do a lot of employment-related services. We're working, and I think we've got a pretty good handle on who those are and what they do. And rather than trying to be the only entity that's doing employment services out there, we want to focus on those things that we specialize, that we can do uniquely well. So we're probably going to be doing less of that resume writing and things like that. There are a lot of organizations do that and do that just as well as we do, but we want to do that in partnership with those other organizations so that our resources can go toward the training and the development types of services that not a lot of other organizations have the resources to do. We've reorganized the staffing within our workforce centers so that they are focused on major employment sectors, and everybody who works with either an employer or a job seeker is going to be an expert on one of the major employment sectors in the metro area, which we think is something that's pretty novel, but we think is really going to increase our ability both to serve those job seekers and those employers well. I mentioned before we're making more of a shift to work-based learning, on-the-job training, internships, apprenticeships, things like that. This last idea of employer development is the idea that we want to increasingly work with employers and challenge some employers to become better employers. We don't want to just place people in jobs just because they're jobs. We want to place them in good jobs. And just as we do development work with job seekers, we realize we have to do some development work with employers and working on some partnerships that we think this is something I'm really excited about, but is also something that's going to take us a while to really get developed. But we want to be somebody that works to develop both sides so that we have better employers and better job seekers in the area. So that's probably longer than I should have talked, but a lot shorter than I could have talked. So I would be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
I just have a couple questions. The services are available to anyone who is a job seeker. So no restrictions on income or other things that would qualify a person to come see you?
The most basic of our services are available to anyone. The only restrictions we have for those services are if you are basically male and over 17, you have to be registered with Selective Service. You have to have work authorization in the United States. But if somebody from Montana wanted to come into one of our workforce centers, we don't have a residency requirement for those things. Now, some of the higher level services that typically involve more one-on-one, are more staff intensive, more resource intensive, there are eligibility requirements that would be based upon employment status or based upon income or something like that. But what we would call our core services are available to almost anyone in the community.
And so the website that you reference, kansasworks.com, would you recommend that we go poke around there and see what all there is to,
yeah, I think so. That's
there?
The state operates that site, and so it's got information about us and our peers. It's also it's a job board. It also has some of that labor market information that's out there. There's a lot there.
Okay, and I only have one more question. I know in your supportive services piece, you know, childcare, transportation, I mean, I think those are barriers for a lot of people. So is there a working partnership with ATA? And if so, can you tell us about what that looks like?
We provide bus passes, and we work with ATA on we purchase them and then provide them to the individuals.
Okay. Thank you.
Here's your turn.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Curious about the level of work that you all do with ex-offenders that are coming back into society. And also, recently we approved the ban the box legislation here at the Unified Government. Is there any type of that? Is there any of that type of language that is going on as you're talking with employers and others that you could address that?
I'll answer that on two levels. The first level is, to me, that's a good example of employer development, of making employers better employers. We see a lot of employers out there that will not consider ex-offenders at all, but have no legal standing to be able to do that. Now, there are some that do have legal standings. Financial institutions, the FDIC requires, there are certain offenses that you cannot work in a financial institution. There are other requirements in healthcare and things like that. We want to, there are some employers out there that we need to challenge and are challenging on some of that. What we also do is really approach this as an individual with a criminal background, especially if they are currently under supervision, actually come with a tremendous amount of support through a parole officer, probation officer, as well as our staff, that a typical job seeker isn't going to have. And if you're an employer that has a problem with attendance or something like that, we've found, and I think there's good data to back that up, that individuals with criminal backgrounds, especially those that are currently under supervision, actually have better attendance, have better, and often better soft skills, and they are more highly motivated than a lot of other individuals. So we really try to package ex-offenders as well as other, what I would call alternative labor pools, whether it might be people with limited English proficiency, people with disabilities, whatever. We tend to package the advantages there and say that typically those things are seen as risk, but they're not really risk, they're benefits, and that we have services and activities that help mitigate some of those risks. And we've got some great employers out there that understand that. We need to have more of those.
Agreed.
I was just going to ask the flip side, sort of one of Commissioner Bynum's questions. So what about employers? What qualifications do they have to meet to work with you? So if there's an employer who's having trouble recruiting, not sure they're getting the right quality of people, do they have to meet some kind of threshold to be able to work with you?
None whatsoever. There are some employers that are mandated to work with us, mandated to at least post jobs. If you're a federal contractor, you're required to post their jobs through us, but we'll work with just about any employer. One of the things that we will do, however, is based upon the quality of jobs, the quality of employer, we've tiered our services somewhat. So an employer that's not paying very well is providing only seasonal jobs. We're going to do some things for them, but not nearly as much as an employer that's paying really well, has permanent jobs, provides great benefits, has a career pathway, things like that.
Other comments? Thank you guys very much. We've been anticipating hearing from you. We know that Commissioner Philbrook has been working with you for some time. I think that really just getting the word out and hopefully seeing this presentation will help do that for some people. I just think there's a lot of people that don't know you exist and probably would benefit from your services. So,
Thank you, Scott. You guys can stay at the table if you like while Greg walks through his presentation. And with that, looks like we're teed up for that, so I'll turn it over to Greg Kendall.
Thanks, Marlon. Thank you, Commissioners, for having me this evening. It's the first time I've ever addressed this particular standing committee, so
a lot of
familiar faces nevertheless. I'm going to start with just indicating that our mission has traditionally been about growing the economy here in the county. We're agnostic about where projects largely land. We do a lot of strategic look in terms of finding additional land for the future and landing projects being sort of that first call for projects looking to come into the community and putting incentive packages together, working with the UG team, whomever we have to get the deal done. And that's, even though we have this very nice mission statement, I usually say do what you got to do to get the project if it's a good fit for the community. And we have 4 key focus areas. Attraction, which gains most of the headlines. That's the sexy part of what we do. The retention side, which is frankly, to me, the most important part of our business, is retaining and growing what we have in the least expensive way to do it. And probably the area of our business, if you will, that we know the most about now because we've actually put money into it. As you all know, you increased your investment in the EDC about 1.5 years ago after piloting a retention person. And now we have Jay Matlack, came from the community college, has a background in workforce that was by design, great bedside manner. And we now have interviewed more than 150 companies, our largest companies, and have a great deal of information now about their workforce needs and what's going on. And then we have marketing, which we do, I think, fairly well based on the budget we have, and then workforce development. And I will tell you that before I get into my presentation that until 2 years ago, I've been here 3.5 years, but I would say that up until about 2 years ago when we started down this path, I think we paid primarily lip service to this idea of workforce development. That was somebody else's problem. Our goal was to create the jobs and create an environment in which jobs could be created. That has changed because the paradigm has shifted in which we can't just assume that it's the community college's job to do. We can't just assume that workforce partnership is the silver bullet for all things workforce development related. It's not just the school district's job to do to train the kids to be ready to go. That's how we generally had approached it. About 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more, we started really engaging the workforce partnership to say, we want you to be part of a lot of these initial conversations, because we were finding the trend being that these large companies would ask us, do you have the product, do you have the site, our client wants to be here, can you put the incentive deal together? But very quickly it became about workforce. Do you have the people in which we're looking for, and can you prove it? And so we started going to Scott Engelmeyer's group and saying, look, we need to know how many people in Wyandotte, how many people in the region are looking for these kinds of jobs, how many, what's the wage ranges for that? Are we in any way at all capable of winning this project based on the workforce piece of it? And started engaging them early on. And we thought at that time that we were rocket scientists, because most of our colleagues and peers didn't let anybody else in the room when we would talk to site consultants. We thought, gosh, we've really broken the mold here. And we quickly learned that, frankly, that wasn't the case either. And so I'm here today to kind of give you what we've done over the last 18 to 24 months, sort of the shift in my thinking, the shift in our collective thinking and what we think we can do locally, and what we've already done, frankly, locally, that we would want to share with you a little bit. Give me that clicker. So I'll start with the fact that this is not a purely Wyandotte County issue. This is a graph I stole from a Deloitte study from 2015, essentially showing that in the next 10 years, this problem is going to get worse, and it's going to get significantly worse, particularly as we see more retirements. That in manufacturing alone, and I picked manufacturing because we have over 11% of our workforce is tied to manufacturing jobs. They're the best jobs that we have. They pay very well, and frankly, it's really at the core of what we do. After government and education and healthcare comes manufacturing, and just pure manufacturing jobs. And so this just gives you an indication that this is a national issue, but it's the communities that figure this out or figure out a sustainable way to address this that will ultimately win in the economic development game. And that's what I'm going to walk through now. So in about mid-2013, we were approached by the Mid-America Manufacturing Technology Center, MAMTech. They're an investor of the YEDC. They've been around for many years. They received some federal funds to help do used to be really focused on lean manufacturing, kind of changed and evolved, and just really trying to figure out how to make companies better and kind of wide scope. They approached us in mid-2013 and said, we have 6 grants that about $50,000 each. We'd like for Wyandotte County to be a part of that. We'd like to know what your thoughts are on how we would do some sort of targeted strategy activation project. Other communities at that time were doing things on growing their patents, figuring out how to do logistics better. A very siloed, very tiny slivers of challenges that were able to be accomplished in a very short amount of time. We put 2 or 3 things together, but essentially came back to them and said, if we could do one thing in Wyandotte County, it would be to approach workforce development. Help us figure out why it is at that time we were on track to have almost $1 billion year. We were growing a significant number of jobs throughout the community. We had tons of research showing how well we were doing in all areas of economic development, and yet our unemployment rate had not come down. And that was, at that time, the thought process was, if there were political chips or that we cash in and say, look, we're going to take a step back and talk about workforce, if we step back a little bit and approach this issue, now is the time to do it because we'd had a phenomenal year. And we felt like if we could begin addressing it while we were riding high, that by the time we came back down, hopefully we would have fixed this problem. We just didn't realize how challenging that discussion would be. And so by October of that year, we had met with the mayor and with the county administrator and his team, including Marlin, Commissioner Philbrook, Commissioner Kane was involved at that time as well, and a core group of folks, and said, are we willing to stack hands on approaching this, knowing that it's a tough job and a tough project, and it may take us longer than we had hoped. Also keeping in mind that at that time, the focus that we were pushing forward was reducing the unemployment rate. And Jason Banks and I, at the time, were like, let's really go after this unemployment piece. A core task force was developed by the end of that year, and we began meeting fairly regularly almost all of 2014. And we would meet on Friday afternoons at the community college from about 1 until 5 or a little after. Long afternoons where we would beat our heads against the wall sometimes trying to figure out what is it that we're studying, what is it that we're trying to fix. And ultimately we determined that it wasn't unemployment that we were trying to fix. That was an outcome. What we were trying to fix is the continuum of the human supply chain here in Wyandotte County. What's the core problem, both at the elementary level all the way back to 4th grade when they start developing ideas about what they want to be, all the way through community college or 4-year college, technical skills, skilled trades, but also the unemployed and the underemployed. How do we collectively change culture in a community that has basically not seen significant change in the household income for some time? So all of these things began to kind of tie together and became much bigger than just unemployment, which also meant that we met a lot more. And as a team at MAMTech, early on ran out of money. So they started doing the facilitation of these meetings really as a result of just wanting to see how this would turn out and being a good community partner and an investor of the EDC. At the end of that, and Scott and these guys were all a part of that. I mean, there are a lot of people that get kudos for spending a lot of hours in these meetings. I'm the one making the presentation, but there are a lot of folks in this room and outside of this room that spend a lot of hours putting their thoughts together. Folks from Hollywood Casino participated. these guys, folks from the mayor's office, folks from all over the community that we asked to participate. We came up with these 6 core areas. Work ready, and these were issues, topics that we needed to flush out further. And so that took us a long time to come to this 6 areas of, should we be a work ready community and what does that mean? Are there school district programs that are out there, or are there gaps in some of the programs that are coming through the school district? What are we doing around marketing and communications to get the information about the jobs out there to the students, to the underemployed and unemployment? This issue of soft skills, what are they and how do we fix that problem? Looking at employer best practices, some of what Scott was talking about. How do we get employers to do the right thing and to begin looking at hiring, and how do we get them to look at Wyandotte Countyans first, and making these sort of connections between folks, and then connecting diverse populations, because this idea that we have a phenomenal immigrant population that in the countries they come from are skilled tradesmen, and yet when they come here they don't have a GED, they don't have much of anything, and we give them menial labor, menial jobs. Many of it is cash based, and so they never get beyond pure poverty in this country. And how do we connect them to these good jobs where we know we have skilled needs? Could we not get them moved up in the process? So today, because I won't spend tons of time, but I think it's important to celebrate some of the successes we've already had because of what this group came together and did. So we expanded that committee. Originally we started off with a core group. We've essentially said, we took the Chamber's Bioscience Committee, renamed it to Workforce, and then debranded it altogether and said, do we care whose committee this really is at this point? What we want is everyone to come to the table. If you're interested in workforce and you have a passion for it, then come to this meeting, and or send us an ambassador to other groups so that we can get as much information as possible. We generally raise the awareness of a collaborative discussion. These meetings now have 15 to 25 people every month attending. They went from a 3:30 to 5 meeting to saying we really want to meet from 3 to 5 at their request to expand the time.
And then ended up 5:30 the last meeting.
And that ended up being a 2.5-hour meeting. And we still struggle to get through our agenda because there's so much discussion about what could we do around workforce. We've had significant amount of information submitted through this committee, if you will. Topics that we would otherwise have never have come across. We've had talks about whether we should become an ACT work-ready community, ultimately deciding that at the cost and the fact that we're not an island unto ourselves, most of our businesses didn't even know what that meant, and so it made no sense for us to go down that path. We have talked about Diploma Plus and the fact that most of our businesses didn't know what that meant. We've included it now in our EDC retention calls to make sure that our businesses understand what the school district is doing, and those companies are now being prepared for being invited to Career Ready and the career jump-starting pieces at the school districts so that they can get more engaged. We know that once the business and the school district have a relationship, they're less likely to ever leave our community because now they have a relationship. We have put together a short video called Made the Dot that begins to put some pride and showing the pride that we have in the very cool things that we make in this community, and begin rolling that out into the school districts and to anyone else who wants to look at it, because it is very interesting. There's a lot more to do around that, but we were able to cobble together about $20,000 to put that video and all the related pieces together initially to make that happen. We have developed a number of HR roundtables so that we can get those human resources folks around tables on a regular basis and find out what's going on, what their issues are. We've got the schools, the community college, workforce partnership, community college, all around the table, basically trying to make sure that we're addressing their needs. Because again, the relationship is probably the decision maker down the line about whether they stay here and grow or they go someplace else. We've even enhanced our participation around Manufacturing Day with the community college. We've talked to the school district about pathways. So we've got great STEM pathways, but not every student is going to go into healthcare, not every student is going to go into IT, not every student is going to go to a four-year college. And so we're beginning to have this conversation with the school districts about how do you become a skilled tradesperson in our school districts and maybe go into a more skilled environment. And that's something that I think we'll see more of by the end of the year. We've talked about work keys and then this idea of pending college credit for preventative maintenance. So logistics is a wonderful industry. We have a number of warehouse jobs, but as you know, we go after things that bolt down because they're less capable of moving and they have a higher wage. But the parts that do pay incredibly well are the things that fix the trucks, that keep those trailers on the road, that retread the tires. We have a lot of those companies here in this community, and the drivers of those trucks make very good wages. And so we're beginning to look at how do we create programs like preventative maintenance so that our kids can go into those programs through the community college and come back out and go to companies that are right here in Wyandotte County. So now this is workforce landscape according to an economic developer guy. So it may not be that of Scott Engelmeyer, who works in it day in and day out. For me, this is a fairly simplistic way of saying it's a complicated landscape, as Scott said. For us, we see all the federal, state policymakers, there's all of these pieces going on up above, and that's the world that Scott has to live in and follow that to make sure they're following their grants and doing all the things they're doing. And then we've got funders and policymakers like the Board of Regents who have become much more involved in workforce. You've got the UG, like you all, that have gotten involved in workforce. You've got the Workforce Partnership themselves. You've got Mark, who studies this on a region-wide basis, and then foundations alone. And you've got training providers like the Community College, Donnelly College. You've got for-profit that are doing training. You've got nonprofit groups. And I'll show you the list of nonprofit folks here in a second. And the unions are involved in this. They have their own set of challenges. On the placement and recruiting side, you've got for-profit. And we thought when we did our retention calls out of 150 companies, we thought certainly there would be a couple of placement agencies that rose to the top as the trend. Turns out there were more than 30-some different placement agencies placing people in Wyandotte County among our top 150 companies. There were very few trends. We've got nonprofit folks working in this, and all the other folks you see there, and then K through 16. In the middle of this is the business, saying we have all these jobs available, and they're supposed to navigate this and try to figure out who it is they're supposed to call today to either help them figure out how to pay for the training, find the employees, and do their job too. And this is where we begin to see where some of the gaps are and the results of our work. Workforce Partnership does a wonderful job. They're not a panacea. There are all these other organizations out here doing workforce that we're not necessarily all talking together. As I've mentioned to Commissioner Philbrook in the past, in years past, you all would have called us together and said, by golly, there's a problem out here. I want to know why Wyandotte County's not getting these good jobs. I want you all to do a presentation. We'd all get together. We'd put together this wonderful presentation, tell you that everything is great. And the reality is, we are all doing a good job in our individual silos. The challenge has been connecting those silos together, and that's what this workforce committee, in my mind, has drawn to light, is that there are a lot of silos out there. The question is, how do we get those silos connected and talking to each other? I mentioned all of the nonprofit and the groups that are working in the employment consortium, the nonprofit side largely. This may or may not be the full list, but this is what Kimberly, and Kimberly's done a phenomenal job. She works for you all in the sheriff's office. They do this group on a monthly basis for a very small fee. You can participate in it. Many of those folks also sit around the workforce committee, but not all. But all of them are doing individual things and doing job fairs and training. The question is, how do we make sure that our companies understand what these folks are doing and how they interact along with the workforce partnership and the business needs that we see? So I mentioned paying lip service to on the YEDC side. And I don't mean that to be hateful to our own organization. I'm just saying sometimes it's okay to be self-critical of what you do and you don't do. If you look at the graph, we have recently just passed the 100,000 job threshold. So we now have more than 100,000 jobs in Wyandotte County for the first time in history. That's a pretty phenomenal thing. We recovered from the recession in terms of job creation very, very rapidly. In fact, we barely missed ever really going down all that much. If you look at the unemployment rate, it has come down very rapidly, even though we're still, I think, today at about 6.1%. Our lowest in the last 10 years is 5.9%. So we're on the cusp of meeting some great metrics in terms of going down. We have the third highest wages in the state at over $45,000, and that's up from $43,000 just about 18 months ago. So you look at all of those pieces and you think, gosh, Wyandotte County job creation is at 4% versus the metro or the country at 2%. You read the articles in the Star and they talk about how bad the KC region is lagging in job creation. That's not true in Wyandotte County. We're double the national average. You probably see that in my reports on a regular basis about how we are double the national and regional statistics on job creation. The problem is, while all those things are great, we all know that our household income is at $39,000, and that's up from $38,000. We're half that of Johnson County, and yet we're creating wonderful jobs. We have over 1,200 jobs, and I'll show you in a second, over 1,200 jobs open today among our top largest companies, paying an average of $43,000 a job. That's a problem. And I don't know, I'm not going to give you the silver bullet tonight, but I'm suggesting that if we were just looking at our normal metrics, the EDC would be telling you, we're good. We're doing everything we need to be doing. But if we're going to go beyond that and change culture and change community, we're going to have to do something slightly different. From our retention data, I mentioned to you that 60% of our companies are hiring, $43,000 average salary, 1,200 open positions. That's up from 1,100 just 6 months ago. Our companies tell us they don't expect this problem to go away. Even if they fill a job, they expect that another one will come open. And so they don't anticipate this being a problem. If you remember the very first slide about 3.5 million jobs being open nationally and growing, this is how it looks locally. And at this rate, if you look at the average age of many of our employee bases, they're in their 60s. And if we're not figuring out how to fix this soon, we're going to have an even larger problem, which means I can't place new companies in this community unless I can find the jobs. And here are some of the top positions. And most of these we can fill at the Technical Community Education Center. So the question becomes, from us, is there a role for the EDC? I can't answer that yet because our board has not decided this. We're going to have a conversation in July about this. But what I would tell you after we've spent all this time talking is that we do see across a wide spectrum, across the attraction, retention, across the spectrum, across our business community. So we see kind of broadly across that area. We are in a unique role in that because we interact with the businesses on a regular basis, they're fearful sometimes of having 40 different agencies calling on them. We ourselves have sometimes difficulty reminding them we're not the government, that we are a nonprofit organization. But we do see how we can connect those. And similar to how we do incentives, we believe that there may be a new way for us to connect people resources with these companies in a similar way using the nonprofit organizations and workforce partnership and the community college with someone potentially on board who specifically is to pull those things together here in Wyandotte between the companies we've just called on and the resources that are available through essentially a not dissimilar to how we respond on projects that you see named Project Key or others and say, look, we've got the need for 10 welders for Project Key. Who has them? How many are at the community college? How many are in the workforce partnership database? And how many of them are coming through Bishop Sullivan or Bethel Neighborhood Group or whichever agency? We need to know this by the end of the week so that we can respond to this project. And we think that that begins to give us a competitive advantage because it would be unique across this country for a company to come into a community, sit in a conference room with workforce partnership and us and the state and you all, and be able to say, well, look, we know exactly where we're going to find these 100 people. And here are the agencies that can provide them. This is the success rate we have with them, and here's how this is all going to work. And we know the incentives through the workforce partnership and how we'll pay for that, or through the state. That would be a unique approach. And then lastly is the piece about outcomes. As you know, we have a lot of metrics that we measure, and I don't know that we have an answer for all the metrics, but the low-hanging fruit is that we have 1,200 jobs available today. Is there a metric that says, look, we want to lower that number down, we want X number of these jobs to hopefully be pitched to Wyandotte Countyans? Are there private partnerships that we believe exist as well that could begin to work more diligently about getting Wyandotte Countyans intaked and assessed and then placed back into companies in addition to what workforce partnership does? And that's kind of the question mark I think we have. It's also a question of how do we pay for that. We've piloted this before through retention. I think that's a logical way to go forward is to pilot this project, see if that's something we can do well. And if it doesn't work, then we don't continue it. And if it does work, then we make it more of an official program of the EDC. We did pitch this out to the Workforce Committee last week. Commissioner Philbrook was there and some others, and asked them if anybody else wanted to take this role, if anybody else had a better idea. But it's time to move forward versus just working as a number of volunteers around a table to say, let's maybe more institutionalize this and figure out if there's a way to make this move forward. That's what I have. Thank you.
Questions for Greg?
So that's all you've got?
I have a lot of data.
That's amazing on all of your parts and fascinating, and I'm so grateful to have the presentation. It's really made the wheels turn in my brain, which is a good thing. But I'd be really interested in, I believe, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong, that the unified government has a partnership with you to basically do a lot of eco-devo, economic development. This is clearly, I love the direction you're going. This is clearly a major component of economic development. What more can we do to assist, I guess, would be my question in a broad brushstroke sort of way. All of you, but primarily the Wyandotte EDC work with the partners at the table.
Well, what I would tell you is that, number one, I appreciate the role that you all have already taken. Commissioner Philbrook is to be commended, number one, for attending almost every single meeting. That alone gives us at least a good connection back to you all and what role we are doing as opposed to not knowing what's happening. We've had great UG staff participation with Marlon and the mayor's office as well. And so when you've got everybody's focus and energy, that makes it a whole lot easier. We came at this, all of us, from we're not pointing the finger anymore. This isn't about making anybody look good, making anybody look bad. This is about the fact that good things are happening in Wyandotte County. Great things are happening, but not everybody's enjoying it. And so we have got to figure out different ways to engage the folks who are coming into this community. I believe that, I think in Commissioner McKiernan's district, he's noted that 42% of his population doesn't have a GED. I can't help those folks. I can't get them into that $43,000 job until they have a GED. But I believe that there are many of our social service agencies who do a great job of that, who, if I could begin to connect those social service agencies into getting the GED, and maybe we connect them to Workforce Partnership on how to pay for that, and then work with some of the companies that we have to say, if we can get them trained, would you commit to hiring them? And I believe the answer is yes. I believe they will. We have a company, a trucking company today, that's turning down over 400 loads a day because they don't have enough drivers. That's a huge amount of, and that's 200 drivers that they need right now. And those folks pay anywhere from $40,000 to $70,000 a year. I just need people, but I don't know that everybody at the very bottom of the pool, I don't think they know that these jobs even exist. And we've got to engage those social service agencies better to do what they do well. I don't want to recreate the wheel. I don't want to do any training. I don't want to get in the way of Workforce Partnership, but I do believe that we have some great programs. We're just not connecting it all as well as we could. Now, I think there's some foundations out there who are willing to help pay for a position. You all might be. Frankly, I don't want to come back to the till all the time and ask for the same folks to pay for everything. I'm trying to figure out if there's a for-profit model here where the businesses might help pay for part of this position. If we can help them do it, that may be the long-term strategy versus the short-term. I'd love to see the community college, maybe even Workforce Partnership, be able to assist us with this, because I think there's some things we can do others can't. Right now, it's all on the drawing board. But you're doing great. We really appreciate it.
Well, I have a vision. Yeah, okay, now I'm getting all upset. Sorry. We've been working on this for so long. I'm so excited that they're here today. Sorry. I'll pull it together here. So, it's not about me. This is about our community. And there's no way that I can tell everybody that has been part of this, that have put all this energy into this, how important it's been. I'm tired of seeing our community talked down about. I'm tired of people saying that we're lazy and that we don't work and that we don't work hard. And I know that Commissioner Kane's tired of hearing stuff like that too. And so because we have a lot of, it's a social issue. And what we have to do is dig down clear into the weeds and we have to work in those weeds and bring our children up and help our community understand that it's all about them and that we want them to have excellent jobs. We want them to be making money so their children don't have to worry about whether they're having food or if they get to go to school or if they get to have a bike or any of that sort of stuff. And I want people to talk about our community like we're a rising star, and we have no excuses now because we are rising in an economic way that is just phenomenal in the United States with our development. So I would ask that we hitch on to that star and actually help our community create a workforce on a long-term basis as well as a short-term basis. And what I see happening is we have to have someone, you know, however we decide to pay for it or hire them, to be a point person to start putting this together. If you want to call them a strategist, if you want to call them a person who works on a project coordinator, whatever you want to call them anything you want to, just call them and let's do something. And I don't see us as the commission paying for the full load. What I see us doing is helping it out in the beginning and being a small partner when we get it established and moving. And I think within full force in the next 5 years. That's what I see.
I just want to know if the presentations have been provided or can they be emailed? They both were excellent.
Yes, Commissioner, we'll make sure you get a copy and distribute those.
Additional questions? This was for information only, so no action is required this evening. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for all your work.
Thanks, guys. Sorry for falling apart.
All right. Item number 3 is the State of Municipal Court Report. Gordon Criswell will make opening remarks while Chief Judge Ryan makes his way to us.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chief Judge Mo Ryan is coming with, I believe it's his annual report about the state of municipal court. The chief has, Judge Ryan has had some challenges, has some opportunities that have come up, and as he so amply does every year, he comes and gives the governing body the state of the court, and that will be his presentation tonight. Chief Judge.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me. A couple of you I've not had the opportunity to meet yet. I hope to do so in the future. My name is Maurice Ryan. Everybody calls me Mo. I've been on the bench since 1999 and the administrative judge since about 2007. And the city ordinance mandates that each year I give a state of the court. Usually it's just a 2 or 3 page, here are the numbers type of deal. But the city of Ferguson happened this year, as did the city of Baltimore and the Department of Justice report, and it caused us to take a look at everything that we do in municipal court. And so I'll go over some of the numbers and some of the issues, and if any of you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Also, Judge Brakovich is here, so that if she would like to answer any questions that are within her expertise, especially as it deals with codes, please feel free. These are our basic court statistics. The number of traffic tickets remains relatively consistent between 26,000 and 30,000 each year. We have between 700 and 966 DUIs per year, about 13 to 15,000. And one year we had 18,000 misdemeanors per year. DV means domestic violence, and codes are obviously code enforcement. The revenue, we get about $4.4 million a year, 2010 down to $3.56 million a year. That was in the depths of the Depression. And codes, it's about $32 to $35,000 a year. The $75,000 figure is an aberration. We went to a new court management software, and so that's inflated the number. It's still around 35,000, we think. And so we wanted to get an idea. We started seeing a notice in the decrease in the number of tickets issued by the police department this year. And so we compared the first 4 months of 2014 to 2015. And you can see the number of animal control tickets is down about 30%, parking's down about 10%, code enforcement is up 57%, misdemeanors down 20%, domestic violence down 5%, and the biggie, traffic, is down about 39%. And I wanted to bring that to your attention because I know that the commission depends somewhat on the revenue from municipal court, and I want the commission to know that they should expect a decrease from what we've provided in the past based upon the number of tickets going down. And again, revenue comparisons, it's been anywhere from 2.2 million to 2.7 million. Right now we're at 2.5 million, but there is a lag. We're collecting on tickets that were issued in 2014, some in 2013. So although our revenues are doing pretty well, we expect them to go down in the near future. One of the issues, the big issues that we had in this legislative session is that the legislature proposed a House Bill 2138. To give you an idea, what usually happens in our court is that if a person misses their court date, they can post a $100 cash bond. All of their warrants are set aside, whether they have one ticket or a dozen tickets, and they get a new court date, and that court date usually falls 2 to 3 weeks later. We don't use commercial bail bondsmen in our court and have not had them since about 2009. And the reason is pretty simple. Bail bondsmen, number one, they take money, but they don't give any back. Number two, they're a pain to deal with because when their clients fail to appear, we have to notify them and have a separate docket for them to notify them their clients did not show. Then we have to give them an opportunity to try and produce their clients, and then only after giving them an opportunity to produce their clients, we order the bonds forfeited, and then they fight us in court, and then we have to go to court to sue them to get the bond money. So we've not allowed bondsmen commercial bondsmen in our court for a couple of years. And I'll get back to this. You can see down at the bottom the bond forfeitures. In 2010, we forfeited $750,000. And last year about $515,000. That's money that goes to the UG and to victims, and it goes a large part to our fines. The bondsmen see that, and they think they're entitled to a cut of that. So they want the legislature to enact a law that would require us to set the same amount for bonds for both cash and surety. Typically, the cash bond has been 10% of the surety amount, but the way this particular bill was written, it would require the same amount for both. So in other words, we couldn't set $1,000 surety and $100 cash. It had to be $100 cash and $100 cash, and so that virtually everybody would go to a bondsman because they charge a percentage of the bond, and it would really line their pockets and decrease ours. We and the League of Municipalities fought this. The legislature is very pro-business, as you can imagine. They say that it's going to be an item in the interim study, and again, we're going to fight it. However, we were asked to come up with a recommendation if we would allow commercial bondsmen, and if allowed, we would ask that an RFP be issued. That commercial bondsmen would be limited to writing bonds on defendants who have unresolved charges only. Once a defendant owes us money, which we define as a writ, we would demand a cash bond so that it could be used to pay fines. This doesn't require any action on your part right now. I just wanted to let you know about it. The Department of Justice study on Ferguson identified multiple civil rights violations by the police and the courts in Ferguson, Missouri. The police targeted blacks in excess of their demographic representation. The city encouraged the issuance of tickets as a revenue source. The courts failed to take into consideration a defendant's ability to pay in sentencing decisions. The penalties for missing court were too harsh, and the city's bond practices were too harsh and inconsistent. The Department of Justice for the City of Ferguson made 13 recommendations for the police department and another 13 for municipal court. And these include for the police that they should focus their stop, search, and ticketing and arrest practices on community protection, not on revenue enhancement. That they should increase tracking, review, and analysis of police stops, and increase diversity in recruiting, hiring, and promotion of policemen. Now, I will say that I think that a part of the reduced number of tickets that are being issued by our police department are because our police department has taken this advice to heart by the Department of Justice, and they are focusing their efforts more on community protection than just issuing tickets. The court recommendations were that make municipal court processes more transparent, provide complete and accurate information to a person charged, review preset fine amounts, and implement system for fine reduction, develop effective ability to pay assessment system. And I want to talk a little bit more about this. The 8th Amendment to the United States Constitution and the 9th Amendment to the Kansas Constitution requires that no excessive fines or bails or punishments shall be imposed. And with Ferguson, and a lot of ink has been used in the past 4 or 5 years about what constitutes excessive fines. And one fine may not be excessive, but when you pile one on top of each other, you get to a point where these people have no real hope of paying their fines. We have people that have substance and mental issues that owe us $7,000 to $10,000. We're never going to see that money. Never in a million years. If we get $200, $300, $400 out of it, we'll be lucky. And so Judge Brakovich and I have been looking at ability to pay more closely in the past 5 or 6 months. And finally, the modified bond amounts and bond and detention procedures, and collaborate with other municipalities and the state of Missouri to implement reforms. This is what they asked of Ferguson. Now, where we come into it is that our records management system is called Regis. It is a collaborative of the city and county of St. Louis, and their court system is the same for virtually every court in the city and county of St. Louis, of which there are 80 plus cities. I've been asked to cooperate with the Missouri judges, and we have talked about what they're doing and what we've done, and Regis is going to have to come up, as part of this Department of Justice study, come up with new ideas that we then can incorporate into our court. Now, our police department does not collect tracking information on traffic tickets based upon race and ethnicity, but Kansas state law doesn't require it. All Kansas state law requires is that the police department set up a method for complaints for race issues or what have you. And previous analysis from 2001 shows some mild disparity between demographics and tickets issued, but that is mainly due to deployment of police resources in predominantly black areas. And this is based upon calls for service and crime statistics. Now, what we recommend and what we're hoping to do in our court is to keep better statistical record keeping that would allow us to do an independent analysis of what the police department issues. We depend a lot on the police department putting in the information because they do most of the data entry, and we will ask them to differentiate between Hispanic and non-Hispanic whites and blacks, and hopefully we can get a little bit better record keeping that way. By the way, any questions so far? Okay. I will say, so far as our practices, I've never felt any pressure from the administration or the commission to use municipal court to help fund city government. Ferguson, 23% of their city budget was municipal court revenues. KCK, it's 3%. We just don't look upon our court as a revenue producer. We did undertake a fine review in 2013. The previous standard fines were established in 2008, so it's about a 5-year period. We reviewed fines assessed by various cities in the Kansas City area and throughout the state. You can see those there. Pursuant to instructions from Administrator Hayes, we set most of our fines and court cost at or below the surveyed jurisdictions. He told us to keep in mind our demographic, and we did. We've recently surveyed some other cities to review their fine schedule for DUI, and we are at or below what other cities charge. And driving while suspended, we are at above what other cities charge at this point. We're recommending an increase in fines for DUI and a decrease in the fines for driving while suspended to be more in line with other cities surveyed. Most cities charge between $50 and $100 more for DUI, and 2 years ago the state mandated that $250 from each DUI go to the state for community corrections. And so that's $250 less per ticket on 700 tickets, about $40,000 a year that we sending to the state for community corrections. And a lot of the cities have bumped their fines to make up for that decrease. Most cities charge $150 to $200 less for driving while suspended and do not require jail or house arrest for first conviction. In our court, a first time driving while suspended is 5 days jail or 10 days house arrest. We prefer they do house arrest and a $300 fine. Most cities charge $100 to $200 and they parole the jail time on a first offense. Now, this policy of our fine schedule was put in place a long time ago by a former city attorney, and he had very good reasons for doing so because there are a lot of bad press about people that had driving while suspended go out and get into wrecks, and then the press comes by and they say, why are you so soft on driving while suspended? And so that city attorney made a decision that this was going to be the policy implemented by the prosecutor's office, and if the prosecutor's making these offers, we as a court decided to go along. What we're recommending is reducing the fines and eliminating the jail time or house arrest for first time. We realize that this is going to result in a slight decrease in income because we're charging less, but I'll be honest with you, we only collect about 35 to 40% of these tickets in the first place because people that have driving on suspended tickets are bad drivers and they don't have a lot of money. And if we eliminate them having to pay for house arrest, we'll make up some of that cost and maybe get increased percentage of fines paid. So we're going to make that recommendation to the City Legal Department that they adopt that as a new policy, and we would like to do so as well. We have established a system of review of fines and late fees to ensure that we are cognizant of ability to pay and have been more generous with community service requests. Defendants that are on disability payments or have shown a consistent inability to pay are having their fines reduced or waived consistent with the 8th Amendment. And again, this is not going to result in a fine reduction, a revenue reduction because most of these people weren't paying us in the first place. We have online docketing now. When we went to our new software system, we had a gap of about 10 months where we could not have online docketing. Anybody can access that through the WYCO KCK website. As of June 1st, we have online payments. We had 11 people do that today. We're getting 10 to 11 people a day that access online payments. At this time, we don't allow partial payments. It's full payment only. However, Kansas City, Missouri, and most of the St. Louis courts are going to go to partial pay. Fairway is another city in Kansas that has the same system, where we're going to monitor how they do with their partial pay because they have the same vendor, and after we check it out, we'll probably go to partial pay on online payments as well. We have allowed partial payments for years. The policy is that if all the charges are resolved, a defendant is not on probation, they can pay $50 and get a 4-week continuance without a court appearance. Most of the cities in St. Louis charged a minimum of $100, and so we've been at $50 for a long time, and we recently added an option of a $20 to $49 payment to get a 2-week continuance. So again, making it easier for people to make payments. And I will tell you that when we adopted this back in 2007, we increased our revenues by $500,000 a year without an increase in the number of tickets, and greatly reduce the number of people that are crowded into the courtroom. So we think this is a win-win. We've changed some of our docket practices. We used to have domestic violence on Tuesday afternoon, and Judge Brakovich had all traffic and misdemeanor. But what we found out that it was overcrowding her docket, and it was overcrowding our probation officers because they were having to report both to my domestic violence docket and to her traffic docket to deal with shoplifters and driving while suspended. I moved my my domestic violence docket to Wednesday so that while I'm doing domestic violence, Judge Brakovich is doing codes. She doesn't need probation officer for code violation, but I do for my domestic docket. And now she and I split the Tuesday afternoon docket, and it goes much faster. We've done a ton of work on jail management. When the new sheriff came in, and I can't say enough about Sheriff Ash and Jeff Fuel and the others, we restarted the jail population committee, and 80% of the people booked into the Wyandotte County Jail have city charges. They also have other charges, but about 10,000 prisoners a year are city charges. We see on video arraignment 100 to 125 prisoners per week. And so we've standardized it so that when a defendant is wanted on both city and county charges, we all put them on Tuesdays. And, you know, when we see them on Tuesday, we say, well, have you had your preliminary hearing yet? I don't know. When's your next court date? I don't know. You know, what's your bond? I don't know. They don't have a lot of information. So what we do is on Friday, Judge Brakovich or I go through the Tuesday and Wednesday callback dockets, and we then ask the county, when are these people set next? We get the information back, and then if we don't need to see them because they're not set for a county docket for a month or two down the line, we just continue the cases. Reduces the number of people that are from farm out that come back, reduces the number of times they have to be seen by us, and they're always really happy to see us at 8 o'clock in the morning in the first place when they know they're going to be sitting in jail for 7 or 8 months. By the way, in the jail, presumptive probationers that are in jail sit there for an average of 7 months. Presumptive prison, it's 9 months. Now, I can't do anything to get those people out that are presumptive probation. That's up to the county judges and what have you. And one of the things we're hoping that by reducing the house arrest for our driving while suspended, it will free up those resources to get more people out of jail that are subject to presumptive probation on county charges. But that's just our hope. Bond forfeitures, for many defendants, when they forfeit a bond, it does not apply to their fines, if any, without specific authorization from a judge. However, we are very free with our authorizations. You know, if a person has a $500 bond, we apply it to fines. Like I said, we currently forfeit about $500,000 a year. And what we're going to recommend is a policy that if a bond is forfeited, the proceeds would first go to pay restitution, if any. If a person's been a victim of a crime, we want to get them paid first. Second would be to pay off any fines. And third, if the charges have not been resolved, the bond would go into the general fund and not apply to any future fines. Now, we have a lot of defendants who post bonds as a means of avoiding court. They know they're going to get hammered on a driving on suspended or what have you, but they're just buying time, hoping they'll get a job and have more money when the piper comes calling. And so they expect to forfeit a lot of these bonds, and they do. We do need to improve our docketing information when a person posts a bond. They can post it in the jail or post it at our clerk's office. The defendant receives a sheet of paper given the next court date. They lose them 90% of the time. And then they come to court, and if the jail hasn't updated it, they don't see their name on the sheet. They don't bother checking with the clerk. They don't bother coming into court. They just go home, and then their bond gets forfeited. So we're hoping to get the jail to improve that a little bit, and our staff to improve that a little bit as well. Here are some of the state compliance issues that we have. Kansas Adult Disposition Reports. Whenever a person is convicted on a misdemeanor, We're required to file a disposition reports. We receive 200 of these each week from the jail. We put them in a file folder or in a file cabinet in alphabetical order. When those charges are resolved, we have to find that form, pull it out, enter the disposition, send it up to Topeka. And we get a lot of people, it could be 2 or 3 years from their original arrest until their disposition. And it's a pain to relocate those forms. Also, if they get a failure to appear ticket and are booked into the jail, we have to find the original booking sheet, the original number, and then put that number on it. We've contracted with our vendor to build an interface with the KBI to submit these reports electronically. However, until we're able to build an interface with Blue Horse, which is the jail RMS, we were faced with receiving paper from the jail and subsequently submitting the form electronically. We've asked our vendor to put them both on the fast track, but we don't have the money to do both interfaces. We have money this year for KBI, next year for Blue Horse. We expend about 66 work hours a week completing Kansas adult disposition reforms. If seamless, it would save us 20 hours a week or more. KSA 21250 requires that the court shall ensure all A and B misdemeanors be fingerprinted, palm printed, and sent to the KBI before final disposition. We don't do this. We don't have the money for the machines. We've asked for them in past budgets. They've been cut out of the budgets. We don't have the manpower. We're understaffed in the clerk's office. The security guards say they don't want to do fingerprinting because they don't have the manpower either. And we don't have a location where we can fingerprint 100 people a day without overcrowding the hallways. We'd like to get an opinion from the legal department about which defendant. Now, I will say this. We're not completely ignoring our duty because 70 to 80% of the people that are convicted on misdemeanors are booked into the jail. They are fingerprinted anyway. All DUIs, all domestic violence, most resisting arrests, all fleeing and eludings, all driving on suspendeds, they get fingerprinted. It's the trespassing, no proof of insurance that requires fingerprinting. You know, it's a whole bunch of niggling little ones that we can't do. So we're asking in our budget to get the equipment and materials, and this may require some effort by the 9th floor to tell the security guards, you're going to do the fingerprinting. Because I don't have the authority to order them to do anything. I just asked them to do it, and they balked. And also, on the 2nd floor, we have an agency that's using one of our offices on the 2nd floor that we don't use anymore. They're just used across the street, and why they have an office on our 2nd floor, I don't know, but we could hopefully use that office to process these fingerprints. We have 3 planned interfaces, the KBI for Kansas Adult Dispositions, the Blue Horse, and also Maui, which is the Neighborhood Resources Code Enforcement. I've outlined the KBI interface. We need an interface with Blue Horse for 2 reasons. Number 1, the KBI interface. Number 2, when we see a prisoner and we continue a prisoner, our staff has to enter the continuance into Blue Horse, and then after I'm done seeing prisoners, then they go back to their office and they enter the same continuance into our system. So we're double entering a lot of information. And so once we get a full interface with Blue Horse, that will be seamless. We put it in one, it automatically populates the other. Maui, same issue as Blue Horse. We get stuff from code enforcement. We then have to enter all of the cases from code enforcement into our system, and then when those cases are disposed of, we have to advise the codes what the disposition is. We're recommending in our budget, we put it in the capital maintenance budget, interfaces and develop everything ASAP. Combined interfaces could save us 60 to 80 hours per week, man hours per week. And then finally, when we went with IMDS, which is our records management, our intention was to go paper on demand so that we wouldn't have paper in court unless it's needed. However, to do so, it requires all of our older tickets be scanned so that their images would be available on the computer. Because of staffing issues, we've been unable to scan many of these tickets. We've got, 100,000, 120,000 tickets that are in warrant right now. Most of those need to be scanned. We get 38 to 40,000 tickets a year. Those all have to be scanned. And so we have requested budget authorization to add 2 or 3 temporary employees to scan old tickets. Any temporary employees would have to be authorized with background checks to work with criminal justice information. The police department has done this in the past when they faced staffing issues. So that's my presentation. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I do. Sorry.
Commissioner Philbrook, and then I think Commissioner
Sorry,
Kane
just
also.
jumped in there. Sorry, Commissioner King. Yeah, so that amount of hours per week, we're talking like around $1,000 to $1,500 a week that we're spending doing that? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm just rough guess on what we're talking about here. Okay.
We pay our employees generally make about $23,000 a year plus plus benefits, and so when you figure 25-30% for benefits, so 30,000, 35 a year, so
okay,
70,000 a year.
Thank you for that information.
Commissioner Kane?
Wow, I didn't know they were paid that little.
Yeah, 14, 15 an hour.
And you've got somebody that's going to retire in your office?
Oh yeah, Peggy Campbell retired. She's a court administrator. Current city practice is that in order to allow for the 1% bonus, that we can't fill her position until her compensated absences runs out. That'll be about December. So if I can replace her, then, and we have another clerk that notified us Friday she's leaving, and so we're going to be understaffed by 2 for a while. And if I do get permission to replace Miss Campbell, and she was there for 35 years, institutional knowledge out the wazoo. If we replace in-house, then her position remains open for a while, unless the administrator approves an emergency. The clerk that's leaving, she's going to code enforcement. They pay more, less. You're not getting yelled at every day by people that have to pay money, so she wants to get away from that. But I can replace her relatively quickly. It's only a 2-month gap with her. Go ahead.
I love it that somebody stuck around for 35 years like I did at GM. But when I left, I was replaced with what you would consider a whippersnapper. Somebody that has a whole boatload of computer knowledge and could spread things around and help the other folks that weren't quite as good with computers and stuff like that, which is kind of what some of your issue is. This lady here is 35 years, she could do it blindfolded basically. I think, Gordon, we need to take a look at this to see if we have somebody already working for us, either in that department or a different department, that has some sort of computer expertise that they can share. And I also don't think that he should have to wait that long, considering he's already 100,000 tickets behind, and with 2 people missing, the hole's going to get bigger. So I think we need to look at filling the head position with a computer. I don't want to call him a geek, but a computer geek. And I'm not. And then the other person that's going, I think we need to get him help as soon as possible instead of waiting for this timeline, which it's the first time I ever heard it worded like that. But if I were you, I'd be upset because you didn't lose 1, you lost 2, and now you can't even fill that 1. So I think it's something that staff needs to look at and take this opportunity to get someone that could be gifted at that type of stuff.
Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you. Judge, under this recommendation for the code enforcement, you're talking about proceeding with an additional administrative hearing for low level code enforcement cases. I think I like the concept. I'm just wondering, is there going to be an added cost to adding the administrative hearing piece to that?
Well, as I understand the proposal, it was to be in-house inside the neighborhood resource. It wouldn't be in the court system. So I can't answer that for you.
Okay, fair enough.
We've submitted, Commissioner, staffing numbers to actually implement this program. This was something that the standing committee asked code to do, and so there's budget language that's coming forth for the proposed 16 budget that would allow us to have the staffing capability to actually implement the administrative fine hearing process.
So it will be reflected in the budget that we're getting ready to
Yes, sir.
get involved with. Very good. Also, I think you alluded to the fact that you are looking to improve the system to delineate between the Hispanic and non-Hispanic whites. Do you foresee that being a problem?
Well, let me tell you how the process works. When a traffic ticket is issued, there are two types of traffic ticket. We have a regular paper ticket and an electronic ticket. The paper tickets have to be entered by police data entry people, and then they type in white, black, Hispanic, whatever the differentiation is. Right now, we don't require them, and the police usually don't differentiate between Hispanic and non-Hispanic whites. And it would take us, and I can't do this, it would take me asking the police chief, would you please have your people, from the policeman to the data entry people, put in this information. And Chief Ziegler and I have a good relationship. We talk fairly often. When I showed him the numbers on the reduced number of tickets, he understood. I talked about the, getting better statistics, and he said, okay, show me who's going to pay for it and how the statistics is going to be used, which are legitimate concerns by him. And it's something that I can ask, but it's up to the PD to implement.
Right, so you're just saying there's an additional cost there would be certainly additional cost to
I don't know that it'd be additional cost, because a lot of times the officers do sometimes differentiate between Hispanic and non-Hispanics white, but they don't do it consistently. So it would take additional training for the police department, and it would take another step or two by their data entry people.
Sure. And my motivation for that is just in light of the fact that this is included in the section with regard to Ferguson.
Right.
And just from the perspective that we be as proactive as possible in terms of disseminating information, to trying to figure out, where we stack up relative to the region and the country. I think that might be something, particularly in light of how diverse of a community we are.
Right.
And the increasing Latino community might be something that at some point might be very beneficial to us.
Yeah, I can tell you that I'm pretty sure you know the demographics.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's 26% black, no, 25.6% black, 26.8% Hispanic.
Right.
And then the rest are non-Hispanic whites. Right. And then we actually have a fairly large Micronesian, Laotian. We've got a lot of Southeast Asian people that come in, and
you have a 60% tickets were issued to whites, and I think that
that includes both Hispanic and non-Hispanic.
That's the kind of point that I'm getting to.
Yeah.
Is if we could break down that 60%, to know what portion was Anglo versus Latino. I think that would be beneficial. At some point, I don't know how it's could be done. I'm just saying that in light of the tensions that we have going on in our country, and in light of our great diversity that we have in our city, in our county, that might be something that would lend some insight. And my last question is just curious, the fact that we've got just a little more than 3% of our city revenue generated by the court. What is the average in the metro? Do you know? I mean, I know we've compared it, but I didn't see a percentage anywhere.
I have no idea. I can tell you that Missouri passed a law that requires that no more than 20% for any city can be generated by court revenues. I can give you statistics on what happens in St. Louis, but Kansas City, Missouri, and other cities are not really forthcoming about that information.
Fair enough.
I can tell you that efficiency-wise, I know that our staff, 10 years ago, the Kansas City Star did a survey of all metropolitan area, of all cities in the metropolitan area. They did public safety, public works, and the courts. And at that time, we ranked very highly for efficiency. And at that time, our cost per processing per ticket was somewhere around $23, $24 per ticket. It's now $32, $33 per ticket. Conversely, Overland Park, they're $50 to $60 a ticket. Kansas City, Missouri, much more than $30 a ticket. You know, the amount of money that we spend processing tickets, and the number of cases that our judges hear is just, it's hard to believe. I'll give you another example. Wichita has, we had 38,000 tickets last year. Wichita had 58,000 tickets. They've got 6 judges. We've got 2. Overland Park has a similar number of tickets, but 30 to 40% of their tickets are paid for before anyone steps into the court. They see people on the average of 1.5 times. We see them an average of 5 times. So the number of tickets are relatively the same, but the amount of people that we see is much greater. They see 30 prisoners a week. We see 100 to 125 a week. The demographics are just significantly different.
Right. Well, I could have longer conversation, but in the interest of time.
Well, I'll tell you what, for any commissioner that wants to talk to me, my door's always open. Just let me know. I'd be happy to come up and talk to you, and when I'm done with my dockets each day.
So around 10 o'clock, yeah, 10 o'clock at night.
Well, I usually, Judge Brakovich and I roll in about 7:20 to 7:30, and we start seeing prisoners at 7:30, and then, you know, we finish our day at 4:30 or, you know, whatever. So.
Great. This is for information only item. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you.
Thanks, Judge.
All right, our 4th item is our blue sheet item. Some of you, Kane probably only really actually, may remember we appoint to the REACH Foundation's Community Advisory Committee. The standing committee recommends that appointment. Says Joe Connor's going to present, but he's not here. I don't know if Gordon or Melissa have any background information or if I should just wing it.
You should just wing it.
Okay, so the request is for us to reappoint the current appointee.
Move for approval.
Second.
Roll call on that motion.
Roll call. Filbert.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bynum. Aye. Markley.
Aye. All right, we have 2 public appearances on our agenda tonight. The first is by Merle Bland to recommend amendments to the ordinance relating to the distance between liquor stores and other facilities. Mr. Bland, if you'd step up to the podium so you can use the microphone. State your name and your city of residence, and you'll have 3 minutes to present your item.
Chairwoman Markley, Commissioners, staff, ladies and gentlemen, I am Merle Bland. I live at 8311 Garfield Avenue, Kansas City, Kansas, and I'm appearing here as Executive Director of Business West. On February 18th, the Board of Directors of Business West passed a resolution concerning retail liquor stores. Business West has studied Section 27593B18 of the ordinances of Kansas City, Kansas. The ordinance states, liquor stores with a minimum separation distance of 1,300 feet between any new liquor store location and any existing or proposed liquor store, and any existing or proposed liquor store location, church, school, public park. These distances are to be measured from the nearest property lines of each location. The unintended consequences of this ordinance is that it simply removes most all vital locations for liquor stores in the name of equality. Simply stated, this is restrained trade. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors respectfully asks that the ordinance be changed so it is consistent with Kansas state law, and that the distance between be changed from 1,300 feet to 200 feet. Furthermore, Business West respectfully asks that the distance be measured from door to door rather than property lines. I would defer the rest of my time to Mike Rhodes, who is a Business West member and who is seeking this change.
Thank you, Merle. My name is Mike Rhodes of 13400 Donahue Road, Kansas City, Kansas, and I'm a member of Business West, as Merle said. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight. I believe I have a PowerPoint that's so what I've got here, I just want to kind of elaborate on this distance and how it impacts a particular business in our community. This first slide here shows the 78th and State intersection, and the outline in the yellow is the Wyandotte Plaza Shopping Center. The 1,300-foot radius circle, which is a 2,600.
Can you get the mic closer to your mouth?
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry. It is the red circle is a 1,300-foot radius with a 2,600-foot diameter, which is just short of a half mile. And if you notice that it clips that tract of ground where the Wyandotte Plaza is by 80 feet or so. So that whole shopping center is now excluded. You're not excluding a liquor store, you're excluding tracts of ground with this ordinance. This excludes 16.5 acres that a liquor store cannot be put. If there's a liquor store there, it's okay, but if the guy doesn't sell his business and just shuts it down, to reestablish a liquor store there under this ordinance cannot happen. So if we go to the next slide, this shows State Avenue from 75th Street to 84th Street, which is, there's no way you can even put a liquor store anywhere on that corridor. And so if we go to the next slide, that shows Parallel Parkway from College Parkway out to 435 and State Avenue out to 435. Now you've got a couple of areas where you have a little gap right in there on State. That's the Spears property. That was just purchased by the UG. There's 130 acres there, but it's overlapped by those circles. So I mean, if they're planning on some retail along the front, and if it's just one single tract, you can't put a liquor store there. So this not only hurts liquor store owners or potential liquor store owners, this hurts developers, because a developer, when they build a strip center, they know that one of the highest and best use in a strip center is a liquor store. So they say, oh, we've got 1,500 to 2,000 square feet here. We know we can lease out to a liquor store. Well, in this case, they can't. So it not only hurts the future owners of liquor stores, but it hurts the developers as well.
Sir, I think we're past time. I give you a little extra since we had 2 speakers. Are there questions from the commission on this topic?
I have a question. To make sure I understand the diagram, all your circles are that distance
Correct.
per ordinance from an
Correct,
existing
and they're all on a
store.
liquor store, a church,
Okay.
school.
Did you happen to look at Leavenworth Road by chance? I'm just curious.
No, but it
Okay.
would end up
Okay.
the same.
So, for example, at 78th and Leavenworth Road, existing liquor store now closed. But this current ordinance would prohibit that building from being reopened as a liquor store again.
If
That
there-
owner died.
Yeah, if there's a school, park, church, or another liquor store within 1,300 feet.
Okay.
That's correct.
Anyone else? Thank you very much for your presentation. We're in the home stretch. Our last item for this evening is a second public appearance by Harlan Brownlee to request the adoption of the One Arts KC Regional Cultural Plan. Mr. Brownlee, please step up to the mic, state your name and your city of residency, and you'll be given up to 3 minutes to present your item.
Great, thank you. Harlan Brownlee, President and CEO of Arts KC, the Regional Arts Council. Good evening. I reside at 119 West 116th in Kansas City, Missouri. I wanted to ask you if you have copies of the One Arts KC Executive Summary, if that was distributed to you. Fantastic. I'm also joined tonight with my colleague Alan Gray, who is our past board chair at Arts KC, as well as the chair for the steering committee for the One Arts KC Regional Plan, and is also a colleague of yours as he is the Mayor Pro Tem in Lee's Summit. I want to begin by just briefly explaining that the reason why we embarked on creating the One Arts KC Regional Plan was that we were asked by a number of people in the community, business leaders as well as governmental leaders, who were recognizing the significant investment and the change in the arts community that was happening across the region. As a result, we began to look at how much actual investment had occurred. And when we started looking at that number, we found out in the last 15 years, $1.57 billion in expenditures in terms of infrastructure across the 5-county region. Many people were asking us, well, what do you do to make the most of that investment? What are the ways that you maximize that investment that you're making? And as we looked around the country for best practices, we saw that many communities were beginning this process of cultural planning, that they were very deliberate about their work and very deliberate about that planning process. So what you see before you is really, in many ways, an unprecedented collaboration. It's a collaboration among the 5 counties of Wyandotte, Johnson, Platte, Jackson, and Clay County. And by the way, Mayor Holland has been very supportive of our efforts here. It recognizes that there are vital and sometimes undiscovered or overlooked cultural amenities in many neighborhoods across the region. And we are particularly interested in seeing some of the priorities that have come out of this. I think it's particularly relevant to your workforce development that you're looking at. One of the things that we saw from business community is people were asking, how do you develop the soft skills that many business people want? And when we look at the arts, we talk about what we call the 4 C's of the 21st century learning skill sets. The skills of collaboration, critical thinking, communication, and we recognize that, and collaboration, and we recognize that those skills in many ways are really developed by arts education types of activities. So one of the things that we're looking at in this plan is how we will hopefully strengthen arts education across the region as well as strengthen arts integration. I want to defer a bit more of my time now to Mr. Gray, who will also speak with you.
Thank you. Good evening. I know I have 45 more minutes to speak, but I want to talk quickly. Cultural planning is an essential part of communities as they're evolving and developing. You'll see across the nation that communities are starting to look at arts and culture as a significant part of their equation for economic development, for creating places, for place making, for addressing social issues. here in Wyandotte County, there's an organization called the Kansas City Friends of Alvin Ailey that has a Ailey camp that we've had here for several years. It's a way of taking children, at-risk youth, and giving them the tools for success. I founded the Kansas City Friends of Alvin Ailey. That's why I threw that shameless plug in there. But I wanted to tell you that speaking from the standpoint of an elected official, back in 2007, Lee Summit, we started our first cultural plan. We took and transformed our community from a community where arts and culture was kind of set on the side to where arts and culture is top of mind. In a short period of time, we were able to take arts and culture and develop our symphony, develop different placemaking, such as expanding what do they call it, amphitheater, creating a historic museum in downtown Lee Summit, and now we're completing the third component of that of having an outdoor performance space in downtown Lee Summit. And I only bring that to your attention to say that that arts and culture are a key part of community development, of developing cities, municipalities, and neighborhoods. And I think it's very important for us as we look at how do we have a competitive advantage as a region, in this case as a county, to look at arts and culture as part of the solution, part of the equation. And I think that with this cultural plan, we're beginning to see the impact. We're beginning to see ideas come forward from citizens, from taxpayers, from community leaders. And they're saying to us that the arts and culture is important. Arts and culture is a key component of our success. I just returned from Chicago at the conference for Americans for the Arts, where we saw city after city, county after county that are engaged in cultural planning. So I know my time is up, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Several commissioners are asking if we can make a motion. We can make a motion to forward this to the full commission for adoption of the plan.
Second.
Roll call.
Roll call. Filbert. Kane.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye. That was our final item. So thank you, gentlemen,
Thank you.
thank you, commissioners.
No, I just wanted to.
Oh. Yeah.
Get it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
see what you gotta do next time, you said you want